Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 334. What are we talking about here? The Skywalker Saga, The Rise of Skywalker. This is the final episode in the series of saga movie episodes that we've done, kind of retrospectively looking back at all of the 9 movies, seeing how they fit into one another, and whether or not this whole saga really makes sense as a whole. So it's a very holistic view, and joining me tonight is none other than our favorite co-host who's back again for a second. This is 2 in a row. You're on a roll now, buddy. So
I am.
Welcome back to the show, Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome, sir.
I appreciate it. Good to be back. Yeah. This is becoming a common theme here of me showing
up. I know. I don't know what to think. Like, it's almost too good to be true. So
what's actually more impressive is that you're on time all the time now. So what people don't always, you pull back the curtain, what people don't always realize is we used to always be missing the timeline with Albert. Hey, I need 10 more minutes. And an hour later we'd start. So this is fantastic. I like this live stream stuff because we actually have a target and we hit it.
That's right. Like, I'm forced to get all my stuff done. I can't be, loitering and getting coffee when I don't need it and all kinds of other stuff. Although I got my coffee tonight. But yeah, this is, and then plus, since I'm starting the shows, Mike usually does all the preset stuff, and now I've got to do all that. So it's just, with great power comes great responsibility, and I usually don't have either one of them. So, anyways, so thank you for everyone for being here. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed these shows. We're going to jump right into this, and we again talk about news, and there's certainly a lot going on right now. I say that it's been minor, but just given the amount of time that we've got and the amount of material that we need to get through tonight, we're going to jump right into the main show. So as we've done with the other 8 episodes, we're going to start with By the Numbers and talk about the how well this movie did financially at the box office. So this thing was a 275, give or take some change, $1 million in terms of a budget. It turned around just over $1 billion in the box office. So domestically, $515 million. Internationally, it was like $538 million, or $558 million. Somewhere in there, you add all that up. Once you take out the advertising and tickets and whatever else fees, I think net profit is somewhere estimated about $300 million. So by no stretch, by every measurement, I should say, this was a profitable movie. I think there's a lot of debate right now about how much more potentially it could have been profitable, and should it have made more money? Was this successful? We're going to dive into all that, but just strictly at the numbers, is it fair to say that this movie did well financially? And this was $300 million is not, something to, I don't know, frown upon, right?
I mean, you're not going to throw $300 million out the window.
I'm not. I wouldn't throw $10 out the window, but yes, right. Point taken.
So yeah, did it make money? Yeah, did it make a lot of money? Yeah, comparatively with other movies, yeah. But I mean, I think it's one of those expectation type of things, right? Of what did Disney expect to make, and then, quite honestly, what do the rest of us view as a successful Star Wars movie? I mean, we viewed Last Jedi with the $1.33 billion that it made as pretty much a commercial success. Now we expected Rise of Skywalker to probably at least meet that, if not exceed it, considering it was wrapping up the entire saga. We had a lot of positive buzz going into it from a kind of a general audience standpoint, at least, about how they were going to wrap this whole thing up. But when you look at the numbers about what they expected, I imagine Disney was a bit on the disappointed side, unfortunately, with it. I mean, you got north of $1 billion, but you've got other animated features making $1 to $2 billion now. So why is Star Wars not performing as well? And
yeah,
of course, we had a lot of stuff going into all of that, coming into it with the fandom in general, and trying to bridge this gap of what we had with the fan perceptions and the fan divide between Last Jedi, of trying to see if we could right the ship a bit in some people's points of view.
Right. Yeah, I think we're gonna peel back some of that here in just a few minutes when we kind of talk about the critical reception, how well it did there, and we'll look at a couple different things, not just the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Right.
But yeah, I agree on all those points. Really, again, it was a profitable. I think more than anything, it felt like Star Wars lost some momentum, and I don't know that you can put a kind of like a financial amount on that, right? I don't know that you gauge whether money factors into that or not, but it did feel like it lost some momentum, and maybe that started prior to this with Solo and some of the other stuff that came out. I don't know, but it did feel kind of like it felt like it tapered off, and everybody went and saw it. And well, hold on, I'll save the rest of that because it feeds right into the reception and how people felt about it. So,
Right.
okay, let's talk about some of the off-screen stuff. Now, this movie in particular had a lot of things going into this that really added to the drama. That at the end of the day, people now I think are hanging their hats on. Oh, it was this, it was that. It didn't do well financially because of some of these things. Systemic issues, underlining issues, whether it be the direction that Abrams had to pick up from, leaving off from Ron Johnson, from everything from Colin Trevorrow, the script. I mean, there was a ton of stuff there. I mean, and let me ask you this just out of the gate here. Have you had a chance to look at the Duel of Fate script? I know you've haven't been doing much Star Wars lately, but have you had a chance to go back and look at that? Because if not, I'm almost thinking we come back and do a show. Maybe it's a Patreon thing where we talk about the Duel of Fate script and just kind of do a juxtaposition between this and the Duel of Fate script, this being the Rise of Skywalker. But have you had a chance to look at that?
Earlier in the year, I did briefly, but I don't remember a whole lot about it. But I agree with you. I think it's something we should come back and kind of revisit just for something to be on the fun side of things.
Yeah.
But the uncertainty of where Star Wars was at, I think coming into this movie and all of the noise that we had to withstand in order to get to the movie's release. I mean, like you were saying, Solo had its own challenges, and then we had different writers. And unfortunately, all of this was rather public. And it's difficult for us to gauge how much the general public understood what was going on.
Yeah.
But within the fandom, it seemed like it was just being, projected at us, and we were like through loudspeakers, and we knew everything that was going on, and then all the different troubles, or we had ideas of all the troubles that were going on with it. And it just, it really started to make people uncomfortable. And I think me and Mike had some similar conversations of like, do we understand what's actually going on with this movie? Is it going to make it in time? I mean, with the with the rewrite and things like that. And we'll talk some of that here in a minute of just, was it going to, like, when was the movie actually finished type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But trying to understand where the movie was at any given moment was very difficult, especially as we got really close to release date, and it seemed like there was a lot of uncertainty about how done was it really, and were they reshooting, or were they just recutting, or wholesale changes, or what?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Abrams real quick, because going into this movie, he's on record. You can go out there and look it up. He's been quoted as saying that his expectations when they're talking about what do you want from the fans, what do you want them to feel, how do you want them to react to this? He didn't come in and say, oh, I want them to just be blown away. I want them to walk away feeling like this is the best Star Wars movie ever. Any of that. He didn't say that. He tempered expectations out of the gate and said, I want them to be satisfied. Those are his words, right? Satisfied. Now, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on how you look at that. But I think he was speaking to what we've been talking about, what we had talked about for almost the better part of 2-3 years. Even when The Last Jedi came out, it's like, okay, who, before we knew it was Abrams, is going to be able to kind of put a bow on this thing? Who's going to be able to tell this saga story that spans over the course of 40-something years? Who can do that, right? It was like an insurmountable, like a task, something that not anyone could do. No one probably could really pull it off. You weren't going to appease everyone. You weren't going to make everybody happy. And I think that's kind of what he was doing there. I think he was just trying to say, look, I'm not coming in here to knock it out of the park. There's too many things at play. You're talking about generational things, right? In terms of what people like and what Star Wars meant to them and how they grew up with it and what they take away from it. All those things factored into at the very end of the day when we got to episode 9. And so really, he was just saying, look, I want them to be satisfied. Right. Do you think we just a high level blanket statement, do you think people left this theater or left the movie feeling at least satisfied? Or do you think it's just too open for interpretation, or it's too subjective of a word to use?
Yeah, I think it depends on which direction you're coming from, unfortunately. If you were an older school fan and things like that, you probably left a bit more on the satisfied side. When we talk about the critic scores and the audience scores, the audience scores were generally pretty positive, right? I mean, so people generally liked the movie and where it ended up. But there was, again, another part of the fandom that was quite upset and not satisfied at all, right? With the way that Ben Solo in particular was handled, right? Well, maybe not how he's handled, but on his death and kind of what the lasting impacts and the lasting, bad taste for some folks that were really, yeah. I mean, I hate to say the word Raylo, but I mean the relationship dynamic and not being able to see it through, and all of those things that go with it, and we finally get this glimpse of Ben, and so I think it depends on your perspective. If you went into it like, are they going to be able to tie this being the ninth movie and have them all somewhat of a coherent type of arc or story that you could roughly say makes sense? And even this trilogy, I mean, those are big things to do all on their own without all of the individual challenges that it had with Last Jedi, and then just kind of this dynamic of these three movies putting together.
Yeah. So we're going to look at some of the critic stuff right now. So as of right now, it's sitting currently at 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's the critic score. The audience score is at a higher. It's at 86%. And those numbers pretty much stayed consistent. I think if anything, the critic score probably came down just a tad from when it first came out. But for the most part, the audience score has sustained, I guess, for the most part. The cinema score is sitting at a B+, which makes this movie ranked against all the other Star Wars movies, even let's throw in Rogue One and Solo, it ranks as the lowest cinema score rated movie. And that's even lower than like Attack of the Clones and Solo, a Star Wars story. That said, depending on who you talk to, again, your mileage may vary. This is all subjective. This is art. We all take different things from it. I still have a hard time finding people that tell me they hated this movie. And again, I'm making a general blanket statement based on my own experiences and the circles that I keep and all that. I know there are people out there. I'm not saying there aren't. I see them on Twitter all the time.
Right.
But for the most part, I think you're a casual fan, right? You're everyday. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I've seen some of the movies, or I've seen all the movies, and I really want to see this one out. Walked away from that theater thinking this was a pretty good movie. I liked it. It was fun. I liked the way it ended. I liked everything about it. I mean, and yeah, I'm sure if they sat down, they could, like anybody else, pick apart things. But for the most part, I'm generally speaking here, I really feel like most people ultimately like the movie. Am I wrong? Or I guess, do you have a different opinion? What's been your experience there?
I had a very similar experience. When the movie came out, people at work kept coming up and asking my opinion because they were very happy with it generally. There were a few people who were a bit nitpicky. There were hardcore fans, and I think there may have been one that didn't particularly care for the movie at all. But I think generally, especially when you talk about the casual fans, the casual fans seemed to really enjoy it, and they thought it was good, and it tied some things up that they wanted to know, and it ended the arc. We got some of the answers that they've been wanting to have answered since Force Awakens, and you see a familiar character come back with Palpatine, and we can talk about the execution of some of that, but it checked a lot of those boxes for folks, and it was still a fun movie. There were still lots of things that were very, very Star Warsy about it, to use a very subjective term, of course, but it still felt like Star Wars. It felt like it was this kind of surreal, huge environment, and it felt grandiose and big. And, we kind of went out with a bang, and I think they delivered on that aspect of it at the very least. I mean, we definitely went out on a huge overture, on the screen. I thought it was, so it met all those criteria. So people, I think, generally liked it.
Okay.
Everyone in our circles did.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree. All right. So let's talk about then just quickly, let's say that, or let's talk about the soundtrack, because we'll probably find moments in here to kind of talk about this. But how would you, we talk soundtracks a lot, and it's really hard. It's just like, it's as hard for me with the soundtracks as it is with the movies to say, okay, what's my favorite? Which one do I really like? Because it just really depends. And I think, if you look at this objectively, a lot of the soundtracks really play well to what's happening in the movies. And so in their own right, they're perfect for that movie. Comparing them is like, comparing your children, picking your children. I don't know which one's best, but I would have to say that for this particular one, and we all have a favorite, but this particular soundtrack, it felt different. It didn't feel even like The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens. This one did feel like it was like Williams was consciously trying to tie it all together. And if you listen to it and you break down a lot of the music throughout all of the soundtrack, there are a lot of bits and pieces from everything in the sequel trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the original trilogy throughout it all. And so that, again, almost an impossible mission, but I think he did a really good job. Is there anything that really stands out because of that? I don't know. I think that's where I struggle with, and that's not feedback. That's not saying it's a bad soundtrack, but you think of some of the other ones, and I can pick 3 or 4 songs that are just like, boom, I love that particular track off the soundtrack. But what were your, thoughts overall on this one?
Yeah, the ones that stand out are typically the ones where you recognize the music from the previous movies, right?
Right.
So those exciting moments where you get the familiar themes coming out, and you get the really grandiose, main theme coming. And I agree with you, though. I think from a musical standpoint of how he composed and constructed this, and really took a lot of the themes and moved them around and changed the dynamics of them, and did rearrange them in different ways. I think it was masterful. It was really interesting to really dissect through some of that stuff, especially if you're a music nerd. These are things that it blows your mind how people are able to do this and still make them somewhat recognizable, but still entirely unique at the same time. And I think from that respect, it was a very, very good soundtrack. But like, I'm with you. It wasn't really anything that really stood out that was overly memorable about it. It fit the movie pretty well, but it didn't have as many iconic moments, I guess you could say, with it. But I certainly enjoyed hearing all the different themes, and like you were saying, pulling from all the different movies that we've seen, the previous 8. And I thought that was just masterfully done. And then it's really interesting if you really want to go through and dig through it and really articulate and pick through these themes. It's kind of a fun exercise to do.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've even the one thing, even like just recently, I was listening to the soundtrack ahead of in preparation for this show. There's the throne room music is in there as well, and it's like you don't even see that. I don't even know that you hear that ever in the movie, but it's at the very end in the last title sequence. That's kind of like this, this is your life, Star Wars kind of piece where he brought in just about everything in the kitchen sink into that last song and that last track. So if you get a chance, go listen to that. That alone is probably worth the price of admission, because there's just so much packed into that last particular track.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about this really last thing here because it's going to lead into our first topic on screen. But this is the Fortnite marketing thing that they did. And this was, it felt so weird because we've never had anything like this. And don't get me wrong, I get it. I mean, they're not dumb. Fortnite is huge. It continues to be huge. It was huge then. They were trying to figure out a way to drum up some interest and do some, out of the box thinking in terms of marketing and all that. So kudos to them for doing this. I don't know that it really made a difference at the end of the day for most people. But this is going to lead into our first on-screen thing. And that's the fact that this first line that we see in the crawl is the dead speak. And for us, we were thinking, well, what does that even mean? Right. Because I was thinking that because I had no idea. I wasn't a Fortnite person. I don't even know that it made really headlines. If it did, it completely just went over my head and I didn't think much of it.
Same.
But they found a way to tie this in. And so the dead speak really, and I don't have the speech in front of me. I think if you want, go listen to one of our 8 million the Rise of Skywalker shows that we did in the past. But we did actually talk about this and kind of verbatim give you what happened. But long story short is Palpatine makes this announcement in the game of Fortnite. And that is the reason why the crawl starts off with the dead speak. So really what I kind of want to anchor this on, this first part of the conversation, is about somehow Palpatine survived. There's all these wonderful memes now of Poe Dameron saying somehow he survived and looks very distraught and disappointed. But do we really care? Do we really care that he survived? Because this is where I think people get hung up on this. I get it. I am not undermining the idea. I'm not undermining the critique or, even just the passion that people have about this particular point. But at the end of the day, does it really matter in the overall story that Palpatine is back one way or the other? And it might. You tell me.
I think so. I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, especially where we left off. I mean, you have to have someone to hate in these movies. Now we can argue. I mean, who are you going to bring to be that central character, though?
Yes.
I mean,
we talked about that at the end of The Last Jedi. I didn't mean to cut you off, but we went on and on about this. Is like, who's left? Who is it? Who's going to be the bad guy going forward? Sorry, go ahead.
Right. No, it's exactly it. Because I mean, we finally got something from Snoke, and then he's offed right there at the end of the movie, an epic throne room battle. But we're not. We were left confused about who could they possibly bring back. We didn't think this was even a possibility, right? Because you're throwing down a shaft. What the hell are you going to survive? How are you going to survive that? I mean, you have blue flames. I mean, that usually denotes that everything's done and you're done. Yeah. He's dead, Jim. Yeah. So sorry, couldn't help myself. But I don't know. Who else are you going to do? I mean, and it makes sense for Palpatine to be that central character, right? He's as tied to the Skywalkers as any other character, as much as Obi-Wan Kenobi at this point when you factor in the prequels, right? If we didn't have the prequels, this would be more difficult to really get your arms around. But since we have the prequels and we have Palpatine, such a central character throughout Anakin's arc, I think it just makes sense for us to continue to bring it all back together, and for Palpatine to be that, that force that's been still manipulating the entire situation for decades in these movies.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the question isn't, and I agree. So I agree with you 100%. I think it does matter. I think what doesn't really make a difference is the how. And that's what I think people are getting hung up on. Maybe it does. Again, I don't, it's so like, in the grand scheme of what this movie is trying to do, I don't know that the how really makes a difference. I mean, it's important. I'm not, again, not dismissing it, but I don't know that it's that significant of it's something to get hung up on. It's certainly, I don't know if it's worth a flame war on Twitter, but this is where I see people really, really go at it, is the how. And I don't know.
I'll agree with you there. Yeah, it's not worth getting mad about. I think it's interesting though. I think that's kind of where we probably agree with that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to understand it. Do you need to know why in order to be thrown into the movie and see the movie and enjoy it all the way through and follow it? No, you don't. It's useful to have some sort of an idea.
Yeah.
And I think they give us a visual representation of, there was all sorts of things going on. And of course we hear, it was this Sith sorcery and, the dark arts and things like that, type of deal. And so we're given a flavor of how it's possible. But I think for you and me, we definitely want to know how this happened, because it's just interesting. It's not even so much that we have to know everything. It's just that we want to know what happened. I mean, what is it interesting, I guess, is more the question. How is it possible? And we got a little bit on the novelization, right? And that was able to, this is where the books are so awesome. You actually got the answers to those questions that realistically there's no opportunity to do on screen. And so we got the the transference and the clones and ideas like that behind all of this stuff. And
right, yeah.
Spoilers if you haven't read the book, sorry.
Yeah, but, no, it's too late. You should have read the book by now, because we're going to spoil.
Well, I just did, so I mean.
But yeah, you're right, because we do get a lot of that exposition. Some of the build, we get a lot of context there in terms of what happened, even to the point of like why he looks old and not a brand new, crisp looking person, right? They try to explain all that. Now, whether you agree with all that or not, whether you buy it or think they're just trying to retcon stuff, I don't know. That's it's a kind of your own individual preference there.
Well, I mean, when we talked about this on the original review of the show, that very first one of, we thought this was his ravaged body from, potentially from the,
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, from the pit or whatever he was thrown down. And so that's what we thought. I mean, without the book, we'd have no confirmation of what that actually was or why he was in that state. It seemed reasonable at the time, though, at the very least. But now we have better confirmation of what was going on, and there's other more interesting questions I think in there as well. Like when you start factoring in Snoke and what he was doing with Snoke, and how that all played out, and kind of what is his involvement through all of these, through these three movies, of how he's manipulating and how he's integrated within these other characters.
Right.
He being Palpatine. Yeah.
So let's talk about Snoke, because this kind of this is kind of a lot of the same stuff going on here with Snoke in terms of, what happened to him? Why is he the way he is? Which is a question I get a lot from me, but about me. Do we care, that he survived? Do we care, or that he is a clone and all of that? I mean, I don't know. Does it do anything for you that it opens up more questions, I think, than answers for me. Do I have a problem with it? Do I still have a problem with the Snoke thing? I guess I kind of do. If I probably get hung up on the details. I'm not the average moviegoer, and I don't know that most people. I mean, most people came and asked me, and they're like, "So what is Snoke? Who was he?" And I was like, "Oh, he was a clone, and he was just being used by Palpatine as a puppet." Oh, okay. And that was it. Like, there was no discourse, right? We weren't going back and forth. They weren't like really thinking about that. It was just like, okay, I'll accept that, whatever. Because again, does it really factor into the bigger movie, at least in not maybe the trilogy, but in the Rise of Skywalker, does it really have an impact? Does it factor in any way? I don't think it does.
Yeah, with Rise of Skywalker, it had zero matters. But I think this is one of those, you have to look at it holistically, though. Of we built this character up in Force Awakens, and you and Mike talked about this a few weeks ago. This larger than life character in Force Awakens, quite literally. And the mystery behind it, we finally get all of this, we start getting into some of the good details in Last Jedi, or not details, but some of these good moments, and then it's pulled out from under us. And then we have to have the explanation behind it. I was actually pretty fine with Snoke being just a shell for Palpatine in this regard. And I think there was probably speculation about this early on about who is truly Snoke. Of course, there were lots of Plagueis things and like that, but I'm pretty sure Palpatine worked in there at some point that there was something that he was involved with in this, especially when we started seeing the Battlefront 2 storylines with Operation Cinder and all of that, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think I'm getting that right?
Yep.
You correct me if I'm wrong, because I see you on Battlefront 2 all the time, or your kids, one of the two.
Yeah, it's probably all of the above. But Operation Cinder. Yeah, that's kind of his contingency plan there. But that really, that plan was more about, if I die, you all suck, and I'm going to burn it all down because you should have never let this happen to begin with. I think on top of that, the next phase of that was to, okay, now how do I come back? Which is where Exegol comes in and Dark. Never mind. But yeah,
but I was okay with Snoke being what he was, and that explanation made a lot of sense to me, and I was totally fine with it. The question is kind of, why wasn't Palpatine just back early on? And we can take all the logistics side of that out of it, but just generally speaking, why would he feel like he needed to mask his presence in that regard? And I guess you could argue that the galaxy would have taken notice if it was Palpatine, and so maybe it's important to lie in the shadows, as the Sith like to do, while they build this massive fleet of exponential resources, apparently.
So on that same note, talking about Snoke, Palpatine, one and the same. One's a puppet now, right? He's just an extension of Palpatine, he being Snoke. The this whole thing about I've been every voice inside of your head, and I guess really whether or not, do you ever think that that Snoke ever heard just Palpatine's voice? We had speculated even back as far as The Force Awakens. Kylo, sorry. Okay. That Kylo ever heard just Palpatine's straight up voice and never, or was it strictly just Snoke that he heard all the time, or Vader, Snoke and Vader?
Well, yeah, based on the interaction they have at the beginning of the movie, I would. It seems to suggest that Ben or Kylo has not heard Palpatine's voice directly. Okay. Or maybe he didn't recognize. I mean, you could argue maybe he didn't recognize what it was, but again, he recognized the voices that were that were rolling around. So we know we had Snoke, and we know we had Vader, and we know his attachment to Vader's helmet. So it seems to suggest that Palpatine was not really a clear player in any of that, and But again, I don't know if it really matters a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's something that comes up, and I thought it was worth at least agreeing that it probably doesn't matter. All right, so you mentioned this earlier, but this new empire secretly being built out here on the outer rim, outer space areas of the galaxy. Infinite amount of resources to build that many Star Destroyers, and these are Star Destroyers that are equipped with Death Star tech that can blow up planets now. So essentially, you've got a fleet of Death Stars that's capable of blowing up planets. So this all just seems, I don't know. And again, I probably didn't state this up front. I have a lot of problems with this movie. I'm in the camp of I can watch the movie and I can enjoy the movie and walk away going, I like Star Wars still. Yay. Right. I mean, it's not, I'm not at the doom and gloom, burn it all down, walking away from this forever kind of phase. I'm not even close to that. But I do have problems with it. And this is one of those ones that it just feels like kind of a stretch for me that this would be possible.
It was a bit overkill, I think, what we saw. And when I was watching this the other day, that was exactly the thought I had was, why do we have so many Star Destroyers on screen? We could have got the point across with far fewer, and it would have been a bit more realistic. I think that's one of the things I have with Rise of Skywalker in general, is that I have to suspend my disbelief quite a bit, or suspend belief, whichever way it is. I have to do that often, or numerous times throughout the movie. There's a lot of matters of convenience. And unfortunately, those moments kind of devalue those parts of the movie a little bit, where you just, something has to happen in order for us to get over that hurdle. But this is one of those that it was kind of unnecessary, I think, from a visual representation, and we probably could have got there with, it was a secret fleet. He's got all these Sith acolytes, or whatever they are, the followers on Exegol, and they do have resources somehow that they can build within a planet, I guess. That's kind of odd too. But do it something that's a bit more, a little more grounded in reality, because at least then the odds, because then you have to suspend disbelief again that the entire galaxy has to show up in order to even have a chance. And it was a great moment at the end, but still, It was a lot of ships.
Yeah, it was. I mean, visually, it was impressive.
Yeah. Well, I
Seeing
mean,
all of them
it
there.
gives you this sense of doom, that's for sure, right? I mean,
Right.
we are in like, holy moly, how are we going to handle this, right? And we had
Yeah.
this when we saw this in the trailer, this was exactly the response we had. Like, how the heck are they going to get around that? How are they going to do this now?
Who's going to blow all those up? That was the
Right.
question. Like
One by one.
Yeah, one by one. And yeah, and I think they addressed that. I certainly did. Now, it's just a bunch of people. Was one thing. I always question, like, okay, does everybody just have weapons on their, family vehicle, the Winnebago that they decided to take out there to help out? I don't know. Maybe they do.
Right. The
Drawing on
family yachts.
Spaceballs. What's that?
The family
yacht.
yachts.
Yeah, probably. The okay, there's a particular line that Emperor Palpatine says to Kylo Ren when he's confronting him, and he says that he wants him to kill the girl and the Jedi and become what your grandfather could not.
Yeah.
And this question, and I don't know, maybe I'm just having a really dumb moment, and I'm not thinking through this enough. But this is one that just I've got open questions about it. Like, what was it that Vader never became? Was it a ruler? Was it the Emperor himself? Did he never unseat? The Emperor. What did he never become truly dark? And maybe that's what he was going for. What is it? What was he talking about there? And did Kylo understand what he was referencing?
Did Kylo understand? That's a difficult question. I hadn't thought about that one. I think in general, though, I think some of your answers are yes. Vader didn't achieve everything that Palpatine believed Anakin had the potential for, right? Due to injuries or whatever it might be, conflict. There's a variety of answers you could give to that one. And I'm thinking that's what he was. He never really ascended, and I think that's what Palpatine is teasing Kylo with here, because I don't think, based on what we saw throughout the movie, this doesn't seem like a genuine offer, right? He didn't want her dead at all.
Yeah.
Despite what Snoke said in Last Jedi, which is a disconnect.
Yep.
Right. But yeah, I mean, but he, clearly he it's this ascension of taking the rightful place at the top of the food chain of the Sith, right? Being the Sith, not being the apprentice, not being the one craving the power, but one owning the power. And that's how I viewed that statement of, it has to be you wanted it, but you could never really take it. And Vader never could. And then at the end of the day, didn't want it because he wanted to save Luke instead. Right. So that's kind of how I view that comment about how it gets structured. Does that make any sense, or is it something
no,
that
it does.
you get on board with?
Yeah, sure. I'll get on board with that. 100%. No, seriously, I will. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about Rey, and let's talk about Rey's lineage, because this is one of the things that coming out of Episode 8, we were at like mass hysteria in terms of who Rey was, right? And what it all meant, and whether it meant anything or nothing anymore. And this went on back and forth, and it gets addressed in the Rise of Skywalker.
It does.
Yeah. And I don't know that, again, I don't know this is one of those things that I really have a big problem with. Is it how I would have written it? No, I'm not a writer. And I can't guarantee that my version would have been any better. It probably would have been worse. But from my own perspective, my own headcanon, this isn't what I wanted, right? But so she turns out to be a Palpatine, and I'm kind of going everything. I'm just going to cover high level. So she turns out to be a Palpatine. Her mom her dad, I guess, was a clone of Emperor Palpatine. So in the process of trying to rebirth him and give him a new body, they created all these clones. And this clone was kind of a reject clone. I can't remember the term they used. Maybe you might just read, but there was something they used in the novelization to kind of say this was a reject type clone that was not force sensitive, and therefore they just got rid of it. Why they didn't kill it still stands. This is what I talked about during the novelization show that we did. Why they didn't just kill this thing off, and suddenly they had a soft heart and said, no, let it live free. Maybe it was in hopes that someday it would spawn a Rey or something. I don't know. But they let it go. It went out into the wild. It bred. It's talking like this, like it's an animal. But they had a baby, and that turned into Rey. And so the father is the direct descendant of Palpatine. So this makes Rey, this is how she becomes the granddaughter. And because of that, now she's got the lineage. She's got the dark side in her. We see this manifest in a couple different ways. One, the Force lightning, right? And right. I think that's kind of the more in your face, only somebody that's dark side, or in the way they explain this is either it's a combination of her dark side powers manifesting, or the fact that she's from this lineage that is just strongly and steeped in the dark side. That's number one. And then number two, we see like, there's the visions of the dark ray that we saw. There was some things there. She makes one comment a little bit later, and I'm going to steal some of our show notes from a little bit later, but she makes that comment to Finn about how she's going to find him and go kill him.
Right.
And that is, you compare that to what we talked about a couple shows ago in Return of the Jedi, and how originally that was Revenge of the Jedi. She is essentially doing what Lucas said Jedi shouldn't do. They don't seek revenge, and she clearly states it. And you can see it in her whole demeanor changes in that moment when she's talking to Finn and says, "I'm going to find him. I'm going to kill him." And I'm paraphrasing here, but yeah, you get that sense that okay, wow, there really is something dark here, and this plays back into my whole theory about where she is able to touch on the light, touch on the dark. She's kind of truly balanced in that kind of aspect. But I guess overall thoughts on Rey's lineage and being a Palpatine, and then renouncing that Palpatine blood at the very end and going with Skywalker, which we don't need to get into too much because we'll do it later. But thoughts there?
I like the idea that she was a Palpatine. I didn't really like what we saw on screen was confusing. I think the book did help clarify it a little bit, but it was more it raised a lot of questions. I think the way that it happened with being like I said, I'm okay with her being the granddaughter. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. But it's all this stuff in between that was really confusing to follow on screen and trying to fill in the blanks. Because that was one of the questions I got was, well, how is this possible? And then of course had all the more dirtier comments of how is this possible type of thing. And,
right.
So it was confusing trying to reconcile all that and piece it together and help others understand that, because I sure had a hard time understanding it as well. And the book did a little bit to help us there. But, but the Force lightning and things like that are always interesting. I think we've seen other characters use it, right? So we know it's not special to Palpatine, but it certainly seems to be a certain level of achievement in the Sith ways of doing things, that you're able to do that and touch on the dark side and actually manifest itself in that way. Because we've really only seen lightning from one Jedi, true Jedi, and that's Yoda when he called the lightning down,
right? Which
I think is kind of an interesting contrast there. But being a Palpatine, it made a lot of sense to me. I actually liked it.
Okay, no, that's fair. I'm glad you did. Again, I think I'm indifferent at the end of the day. I don't really care. I got so hyper focused on just the Reylo aspect of it and the redemption story that all this stuff kind of just, all right, it's fine. I'll roll with it. Right. I'm not going to get hung up on it.
It was more tying a bow on the parent discussion, I think, more than anything else,
yeah.
Which is, I think, what I did not enjoy so much about it was that we were tying that loose end, and there wasn't really much to it, and it just raised other questions, and which I'm usually okay with, but this one, it felt a bit more of like a throwaway type of thing, and it did focus her a bit of why she would continue pushing towards the dark side, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the very end, where we're talking about what her final decisions were when she's confronting Palpatine. But
yes,
tying loose ends and things like that, it felt more of that. And of course, when we came to this movie, our Caro meter on the on the parent and then the lineage was pretty much on empty there.
Yep. Yeah,
so
we were done.
Pretty much over it.
Yeah, we were over it for sure. Okay, so let's move to here's a line that I still get hung up on, and I don't really understand it. I've had it explained to me a number of ways, and I appreciate everybody's explanation, but I still just I don't buy it. I don't get it, and maybe this is just one of the things that I'll never really come to terms with or agree on. But it's a line of her giving the lightsaber to Leia early on in the movie and saying, "I hope someday I'll earn your brother's lightsaber."
Right.
And that to me it bothers me because in a lot of different ways, and a lot of these may be superficial, but I just don't like the fact that she's wielded this lightsaber. First of all, let's just forget, and I keep saying this, forget if whether or not you agree with it or disagree it. It's happened. It is Star Wars now, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. This saber called to her, right? It called to her specifically. Maz tells her. We all know that. She gets a lightsaber, and now she's heir to this weapon, whether you like it or not. She's heir to this weapon. So that's number one. Two, she then ends up fighting Kylo Ren not once, but twice, and uses his lightsaber to defend her, potentially, arguably, the galaxy. And a year passes now between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. I'm assuming she's used this lightsaber, at least, if nothing else, at a minimum. She's used it for training along with Leia.
Right.
But I'm going to guess that there are other adventures out there where she had to use it, because I don't think this is her first time cutting anything up that we saw in the Rise of Skywalker. So if you take all that into account,
And
the
she repaired it.
idea, and she repaired it. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Yes. She probably did all the legwork and pulled out the books and figured out how to do all that. I don't know. But
She
the
did.
idea,
Yeah, it's in the book.
it's in the book, right? Yeah. The idea that she somehow doesn't feel worthy of saying this lightsaber is hers, or that somehow she has to still prove herself to Leia in order for this lightsaber to be hers, and yet it's something that she'll bury later down in the movie. But that aside, I don't like this. I don't understand why. It feels like there was a regression here. There's something that was missing, and I don't know if this is lost in translation through all the different script writings and versions, and just leave it in there. They'd already filmed it. We needed something to fill the space. I don't know, but it just feels out of place. Am I
Right.
getting hung up on this too much?
There's probably some practical answers to some of this too when it comes to Carrie Fisher and some of the screen time that she had and handing of the saber and things like that. I have a feeling there was probably something in there. And this was a bit, I agree with you. It does feel a bit shoehorned. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You could get yourself there, I think, though, if you start to view her view of herself and her doubts of who she is, and still uncertain of how she fits into everything, and whether or not she feels like she deserves this mantle of even Jedi or of a student of Luke or Leia, and those challenges that she have. I mean, you can still just feel all that doubt that she has, and when you do that, you feel not worthy of certain things. And so I'm willing to kind of get in that camp of that, of that line of thought, of that, okay, she can hand it back. But I do tend to agree with you in general, though, if she's been through way too much with this lightsaber. It called to her. There's clearly a bond or a connection with the crystal, however you want to view that. So it's difficult to get that. You can move yourself in that direction, I think, if you wanted to dig a little bit deeper. And that's kind of where I got to, is that she's just have all this doubt still of what it actually means to be or to develop into what she is. And, while Luke came back for her, now she's training with Leia, who she puts on a pedestal, right? She means so much to Rey and to Poe. And there's a lot riding on all of this, and they've had to rebuild the resistance. So there's all this pressure on her as well. And I think the lightsaber, again, is that symbol of the Jedi. And she is uncertain whether she's ready to wield it or not, and ready to be that symbol with it.
Yeah.
Because people already view, Poe kind of views her that way too, right?
Yeah.
Get in the fight. We need you out there with us, not here doing your Jedi stuff.
Exactly. Right? No, I can see that. I think so. Maybe this gets reconciled for me if there's ever anything released in content wise in between, 8 and 9. If they tell the story, I'll probably come to terms with it. But yeah, you make a good point. There's probably more there that we just don't have, and that's probably what I'm getting hung up on. Right. Because they're not saying it in the movie, they're not saying it in the novel, I guess. But
right.
Okay, so speaking about regression, and I think I know where you stand on this one, and so I do want to hear your opinion once again, because it helps me. But I don't like the fact that he went to the helmet. Now, I say this as when I saw the helmet again, when we go, let's roll back the clock to Star Wars Celebration in Chicago, right? We're there. We saw the trailer for the first time. I was out. We were on cloud 9, thinking about all the possibilities and how all this stuff was all the different things that they were just throwing at us. And I think what we were expressing at the time was, this is all awesome. Like, visually, this looks amazing. Palpatine's back. He's in the helmet. You've got Rey jumping over, TIE fighters. Just go on about everything about that trailer. But I think we were all pretty much in agreement that how in the heck are they going to explain all this stuff? Like, how is it all going to make sense? And I don't know that it does now, retrospectively speaking, if it all really truly makes sense. Right. But the way, I don't know that they ever really explain the helmet coming back on him. Now, it's cool. Visually, it looks awesome. We got the red cracks. It's, very symbolic of, who he is as this fractured person now. He's even fractured even more than he was coming out of The Last Jedi than he's ever been in his life. All of that certainly makes sense. And especially when you tie that in with the fact that he just came from seeing the Emperor, and the Emperor is throwing this all back in his face, and he's promising him power and the new order, and, living up to the potential that Snoke talked about, and Vader, of his grandfather and all that. You throw all that in there, I can see it. I just have a hard time really thinking or believing that he would necessarily go back to wearing a helmet only to take it off halfway through the movie and not use it again. So it's just, is it a visual thing? Is it a fan appeasing thing? Is it hey, I had him in the helmet before and I love that, and I loved him out of a helmet, so I'm going to kind of play. I'm going to ride, walk the fence and have both the best of both worlds in this movie. What was going on there?
Yeah, and I want to say that there was another component too, that the helmet represented the leader of the Knights of Ren as well. And I'm trying to remember where I heard or read that from, but I believe that was another aspect of it too, of why it was important to have it. And of course, we had to bring the Knights of Ren back into this thing. Yeah, I think it's one of these things of adopting the mantle that he thought he was rightfully supposed to have. Right. So Vader had mask, Vader had the suit and things like that. It was ominous. That's what this leader has. I think some of it though was also to hide himself. And again, like you were saying, the fractures are definitely still there. Mm-hmm. They seem to be deeper than ever. And this is one way to hide that from everyone around him, especially within the First Order itself. And it's interesting. And I think, who was it that pointed this out? I think it was Utini in Discord, of saying that it's interesting that he has the mask on in front of his peers, but when it comes to Rey, he does not have the helmet on, does not have the mask. He's always looking at her. She can see him. And I think that's an important note to make on some of the stuff. And, but that's not always true, because they're fighting and things with the helmet on as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, but no, it's a good point. Like he takes it off at the moments that he really wants to have that. It's kind of like us in the real world, right? If you want to have a conversation with somebody, you can send them an email, you can make a phone call. But if you really want to make an impact, you set up some personal face-to-face time, and we don't wear masks. So yeah, it's even more effective that way. But
right. And we get if you just look at his body language and his confidence and what he's exuding, and I guess the power and control aspect of all of this, in those earlier conversations when she's on Kijimi, he's on Kijimi and she's in his quarters. Yeah. And those types of things. He's standing up straight. He's very, imposing. And with the banter, there's no give for him. He's quick to respond. It's very clear. It's very concise. And it doesn't have this ambiguity of Ben showing up and Ben coming through. And you can take that symbolism of it's contained within the helmet and within the mask. And so I think from that respect, I think it was good to see the mask come back and be able to have, that character, Kylo Ren, be associated with the mask. And anytime we start to see him without the mask, we start to equate that to, conflict, and potentially that being Ben starting to come out and begin to emerge from that.
Yeah. So speaking of that scene, or in that same area of the movie, we have another moment that I don't know if there's answers to. Maybe it's just lost and we'll never really understand. But, Kylo Ren, this is the second time. In The Last Jedi, he makes this comment about, you're going to turn and join me, whatever else, blah, 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 right? And that didn't turn out to be true. In this movie, he makes the same comment. He says, when I offer you my hand again, you're going to take it. And technically, that never really happens. And so it starts poking holes in his ability to foresee the future, first off. And maybe that's just not his strong point, right? Maybe he's all about freezing bolts and dropping into people's minds, and farseeing is not his thing. But it just keeps coming back. I mean, and being all things fair, this is really only the second time that we know of anyways, but he says this to her and it doesn't pan out. Any thoughts or explanation as to why he would be, or maybe he's just trying to bluff and persuade her, and he's using that as a tactic.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was going. Is this a manipulation tactic, right? Of giving, he can sense the doubt within Rey. He can sense that she's struggling to keep it all together. And he just keeps putting this doubt. She has seen herself on the throne, next to him. So clearly it's something that he can touch on. And I don't know if he knows about that vision or not. It doesn't seem like he does, but
right.
That's something that you could see why she would respond to something like that. And if he got any kind of sense that was the case, why he would do it again. And again, in Last Jedi, they had that moment where there was a consideration, right? And so he's going to be bold enough to be able to say, you won't make that same mistake twice, or you won't make that same decision twice. But I think it was one of these aspects of, I don't know, again, manipulation, trying to put those seeds of doubt in her head.
Right. Head game.
She's not ready, and her story, is still developing, and then it's with him. Like they are a pair, and there's no escaping that. I think from that respect, it's true, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, at some point she did take his hand, kind of. They joined forces at the very least. So you could argue that they got it right on the third time.
It's one of
Not
those certain point of
physically,
view
but
things, huh?
right. I mean, not physically, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's. I have Lando in the notes because I just want to talk about Lando. I don't know. There's really a lot to talk about. I mean, he's got a pretty minor role, all things considered. I mean, yeah, he's got the big moment at the very end again where he saves everybody. Is kind of a repeat from Return of the Jedi. I get that.
Right.
But it was good just to see him. And I mean, we're doing this on the day of the July 22nd when there's rumors floating around that there's a Lando series that's kind of looming here in the future. So it would be great to see him in that along with Donald Glover. But let's. So I don't really have anything else. Do you want to add anything to Lando? I think it's great, and we're not.
I was watching this kind of simulcasted with a friend of mine. I told him I was going to watch it, and so they fired it up too. And I got a comment during the Lando moments. Lando's having so much fun, like he's laughing, and they were just so excited to see that. And I think that's the one thing I would share with it is he was just having a grand old time. He's back in his environment, and we didn't get the L3 Falcon moment that we all keep thinking exists. And if it doesn't give you if it doesn't continue to show you that pulling things from other, like from the comics and from the books and from even other movies in the canon, don't really seem like they're a thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as much as we would love for them to be true, they just don't seem to be.
Right.
Unfortunately. And that's unfortunate, actually. I thought there were always a couple cool moments that they could have done of, hey, oh girl, and things like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, don't get me started. We really, really wanted this moment probably nearly as much as, at least personally, nearly as much as I wanted the Chewbacca and Kylo Ren moment to happen, which did in the book, but didn't happen in the movie. But yeah, that never panned out. So unfortunately, that's just the case. So yeah, so I would agree. Yeah, he had a great time. And if you're ever wondering, like, well, what was Lando doing all this time? I will refer you to the Battlefront 2 storyline because you see a lot of Lando there, and you kind of get an understanding of where he's been. We're not going to talk about that because we've got a lot of show here. So, all right, we get the kind of this revelation, at least maybe confirmation for some people, depending on how you walked away from The Force Awakens and even The Last Jedi. But we get this official confirmation that he is Force sensitive, and there's clues that they drop throughout the movie, which I don't think that they were all as obvious to the general audience as I thought they were going to be. And that's just my, again, personal feedback from talking to people. This is one of those things that I tell people, I'm like, well, yeah, Finn was Force sensitive. What? Yeah, no, he's Force sensitive. And then I start telling him, oh, you remember when he says this and he kind of feels that Leia dies, and you go back and watch this, and then it kind of clicks that, oh, these hints were dropped and all that. But I guess we don't need to talk about whether or not it was obvious or that, but just the idea that he is Force sensitive, and the idea that whatever the future looks like with Rey and whatever she rebuilds as the new Jedi Order is likely going to include Finn, right?
Yeah, certainly seems to suggest that. And as well as maybe some of these other stormtroopers. I mean, they were Jaina, and then seemed to be suggested they might be Force sensitive as well, right? I mean, how else do you reject the programming type of thing? But yeah, there were always little hints, and I agree with you. I think they were subtle enough until Rise of Skywalker when they became more obvious, especially in the second half of the movie, where it was clear that he had some type of sensitivity. We could argue how strong he is. And of course, we kind of hypothesized some of this stuff of when we saw how he was able to, hold up against Kylo Ren. Like, how is that possible aside from training without some innate ability to be able to do some of that? So you could always make some arguments and retrofit things in there too.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Okay, so the next thing that kind of happens in the movie in terms of a big moment is the Force healing of the snake. And I don't want to steal your thunder because as part of this series, we're kind of doing our own little scene analysis, quote analysis, moment analysis thing at the very end. So this is, spoiler, this is Jonesy. So we'll skip this and come back to it a little bit later because I have a feeling you're going to probably tie all that together. Let's talk about the big moment though from the trailer. And I've seen this movie now 1 billion times at least, and it still gets to me. I really, really like this moment. And I know, Mike has not been a big fan of the slow motion stuff. And I think this is one of those moments where it really pays off. And this is Leia doing the backflip over the TIE fighter. Right. And then, people have really torn this thing apart of like, why does she have to turn around and all of that? And that's not even I don't really want to even debate that, but just from a really cool moment for Rise of Skywalker, I mean, this is really kind of hard to top this one. You agree?
Yeah. And it gives us an idea of what are Rey's abilities at this point. I mean, we've seen her in training, but this is our first kind of on-screen moment of where we could see what is she truly capable of. And we got some hints of it when she was floating rocks and floating herself. That was cool. But yeah, I mean, who else is going to take a TIE fighter on single-handedly and win?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Kylo Ren being the pilot of it too, by the way.
Exactly. So I agree with you. It's one of those moments that's just really, really cool. And when we saw it, I just remember I like comparing how we thought then versus how we think now of what we thought was going to happen.
Oh,
right?
my
We were
goodness,
like, oh, she's jumping on it, she's going to land on it. And now they're a team, right?
Right.
It's Team Reylo and you know all of that. But then of course we have this really tense dynamic that was leading to a really, I think, potentially more iconic scene with the Force lightning and the Chewie transport scene and all of that. But I agree, man. It's just a really cool moment.
Yeah.
Especially when he emerges out of all that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like, how did that happen? Right. But yeah, absolutely. It's a cooler Star Wars moment, I think, if you objectively looking at it. So the next one is the next kind of big moment is just Chewie being captured. And really, I've already talked about this a little bit, but we didn't get to see what that relationship was like or what that, I don't know, maybe it's a reunion of relationship between Chewie and Kylo Ren, because we know he was a prisoner on there. We saw the artwork. There's plenty of that's been released. I think there's at least 3 or 4 different stills that were done for this moment in the movie. And I don't know that it was ever filmed. It was included in the novel. And it was pretty subtle in terms of what, they didn't really get into a lot of explanation, but they just got into, you know, Kylo Ren's head a little bit in terms of what he was thinking, knowing that Chewbacca was there, because we now know that he was pretty close to Chewbacca. What do you call him? Uncle Chewie, I think was his nickname. Yeah. Something like that. I don't know, he had a nickname for him, a pet name or whatever.
Right.
But he was family as much as Ben Solo, or as much as Han Solo was, or Leia, maybe even more so, because Chewie was always kind of around, even though Dad wasn't sometimes. So
yeah, and Chewie's a caregiver. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got some of this flavor from, I think, some of the Chuck Wendig books too, The Aftermath. You know, we would get some idea of the relationship that they had. I know that was largely focused on Han, but you know, we get these ideas that, you know, Chewie was integral. I mean, we all assumed this was the case, and it gave us that confirmation. I think we were all hoping we would see, and it makes these moments in Force Awakens and in this one mean all the more.
Yep. All right, let's jump to Kijimi, because there's a few things that kind of happen on Kijimi that are probably worth noting. I mean, we get Zori, Bliss, and Babu Frik, and I think I mentioned this earlier. The novel that's coming out, Poe Dameron Freefall, I was going to grab, but I don't need to. Poe Dameron Freefall, that's coming out. Babu Frik is actually in that, and that's actually a really, really fun book. I can't wait to talk about it. But so you'll get some more of him and some more of Zori Bliss in that one, and you do get the background on why Poe was a spice runner. Right, so that's kind of cool. We got to see on Kijimi C-3PO kind of go through, I guess, some character development. He gets wiped again, which is just kind of like this running joke. And we got with C-3PO, like I really felt like this was a strong movie for him, and I say that, and I don't get a lot of people agreeing with me, and that's fine. I don't necessarily think that they have to, but it just felt like when I look back at all the movies and think about what his lines were, this is for me right up there with like Empire Strikes Back in terms of his delivery and the comedic moments being funny but not over the top. I mean, it's certainly not Attack of the Clones, right? So I felt like, yeah, and I mean that's like cringy, right, in terms of what they did there with his character. But he did really get to stand out. The only question I still have, we did spoilers leading up to the Rise of Skywalker, and there was a lot of stuff that was released and talked about where he was using weapons. And I think we have Anthony Daniels on record saying at one point prior to leading up to the release that we were going to see a different 3PO and that he's had enough. And this was all playing right into the stuff that we were seeing that was getting spoiled and released, but none of that happened. And that I think the closest we got was Rey gives him the Wookiee bowcaster and the bandoliers, and then that's kind of it. We don't really see him take it. If had the rumors come true, we would have seen him shooting people with the bowcaster and the lights, the eyes turning red, and maybe the Sith programming was, glitched, and suddenly he went into like attack mode or killer mode or whatever. But I don't know. So just give me some thoughts, I guess, on the characters that were introduced, Babu Frik and Zori Bliss, and then C-3PO's role in all of this.
Oh, I love Zori Bliss, and I hope we get more content there, because I think she was just a really interesting character. The dynamic with her and Poe was fun to watch. The banter was really pretty perfect.
Yeah.
From start to finish. I really enjoyed that. And Babu Frik was just, I mean, first of all, he's cute, right? But he's just funny. And I mean, you could just tell he had this energy to him. I think it really helped bring a little bit of levity to some of those moments, which were really a bit darker and kind of doom and gloom, to some respect. But I really like the characters, and I'm glad that they're getting more content with them, because I think these are things that they can expand upon, and they're really, really fun stories. And I agree with you wholeheartedly about C-3PO. I think this was a bit of a redemption movie for him for the sequel trilogy, because again, the writing of it was really good, and it was funny. It was genuinely funny. And I think the one that sometimes is not even what you say, but when they get to Pisana and they all look at him and they're just staring at him.
And then
he turns around. And then he turns around and looks too. Those types of things. It was like, this is great. A New Hope Star Wars and Empire Star Wars. Right. And it was so much fun to be able to see that from 3PO, who has really kind of been put through the ringer in a lot of different ways in the movies and with fans, I think, in general. And so it was really good to have him have that moment, and for him to have, a moment of decision. What I really like is that Rey gave him the choice. She asked him the question of, the odds better than all of us.
Right.
And 3PO had to make the choice of what was best for the greater good, and sacrificing himself and knowing what it would cost him, or potentially cost him. And I thought that was a really, really good moment of really character development to your point, where he had to, self-preservation was not his primary function of sorts, where he's complaining. Right. And I thought that was a really good moment, a really powerful moment for him.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because if you think about 3PO over the years, over the movies, he is the one that's always scared and running away and saying, no, we shouldn't do this. And it is about self-preservation. And we kind of saw the complete opposite here in that decision. So let's talk about Chewie's rescue and recapture. The only thing I want to say here is going back and watching that, they break Chewie out. They're running through the halls, which I think cinematically, it's a really cool moment. I like the way he filmed all of that and the way the shots were, and people were falling over and the camera's moving, right? It's all great Abrams stuff. Right. The one thing that got to me, and I kid you not, it literally happened a couple days ago in viewing. I've seen this movie a million times, like I said, but I've never really paid attention. And I turned the subtitles on this time, because it can be a different experience. But in that moment, when they finally get captured again, and it's after Poe gets shot and Finn realizes they get surrounded and everything goes really quiet, and Chewbacca kind of looks up and he makes that noise.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on there. I just assumed that he was like saying something like, oh man, this stinks, or what. Or I didn't know I thought he was talking.
I thought it was a laugh.
Yeah, well, that's it. The subtitles say that he laughs in that moment.
Oh, cool.
So you got it right. I mean, good for you win but I had no idea. And I just thought that was, when I read that, I had laughed out loud, like thinking that Chewbacca, now it just changes the scene for me. Like he went from now I have this whole thing in my head of like, he sees Poe and Finn show up and thinking, there's no way we're going to get out of here. This is ridiculous. They're not going to get me out of here, kind of thing. And then that's him laughing maybe at them, or the situation of, I just got out, but look, I'm right back in this again, kind of thing. But it just changes the dynamic of that scene. So I have a new appreciation for that small moment where he laughs there at the very end after being recaptured. So
it was a little out of place, but at the same time, it was just of all the things to laugh at. I really appreciate that. I love laughing at really inopportune moments.
Yeah, exactly.
It's inappropriate too. Yeah. You just can't help yourself. Sometimes out of nervousness, but others are like, I'm sorry, that's just funny.
Right, it is. Sorry, can't help it. Okay, so in the last episode, 333, you talked in pretty great detail, I think, about the force timing. And in this movie, we got new dimensions of that. So we got, we've got their ability to block, like physically block each other's lightsabers. We saw that early on, I think, when they were fighting on Kijimi. They were in the force time, but they were able to cross sabers. And then they were interacting with one another over this force timing thing. I don't know, what's the right term? I keep saying that. I don't think that's really, should we be calling it force timing? I don't know.
Force timing, force Skyping. It's kind of taken on something entirely different now.
I guess if you're an Apple fan or versus a Microsoft, maybe your lingo is different. There's probably a real word, and we're terrible Star Wars podcast hosts for not knowing the real word. But anyways, you know what I'm talking about. So they're doing this, and they're having this moment together, and they're able to block each other's stuff. They're interacting with each other's environments now.
Yeah.
Right. So we saw that happen.
Right.
On top of that, they're able to kind of see each other still. We see that's going on, but I don't know what, this really speaks to this dyad a lot more. And I'm just really curious as to one, if we're ever going to see any more of this later down the road. I don't. My answer is I keep saying this. I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime. I don't think we're going to see any more beyond this movie, and I don't know that we'll ever see another explanation of the dyad and exactly what that truly means. And maybe some of the answers that lie in there are how do they do what we just talked about? How are they able to communicate with one another, and all that? But I guess was there anything that really just stood out outside of that for them in their dynamic in their ability to use the force and the force powers that they had? This all makes sense, I guess, right?
Yeah, to touch on your last point, I hope we don't see it so that it feels still unique and special to the dyad. I think that's something we want to keep that integrity for. I liked it. This is another natural progression, an evolution of what they were experiencing in between the characters. And when they say the dyad later on, you start to make sense that these things are unique and these things are special, that they're able to do these, and their bond is growing stronger as they both increase in their strength, but also that connection is not going anywhere. And if anything, what we thought was shut off in Last Jedi has just increased, potentially exponentially now. Like you said, as they're now physically able to integrate with other environments, they still can't see what's around them until they interact with it. And they're able to see, on Posada, they see, they see the beads on, or whatever it was, the fruit from Kijimi. And then, of course, the mask as after the pedestal is destroyed. And, of course, the beads and all of that.
Yep.
So I thought those were really cool moments, really good development moments that helped bridge these worlds. And again, help them continue to interact in a more physical way now without necessarily being in the same scene, the same place, the same location at the same physical time. And it really strengthened and kind of gives the Force a new dynamic, and then continued to build on that dynamic that they gave to us in Last Jedi.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I would say too, I guess the one big moment, I guess the only other power that we saw manifest here was just the passing of the lightsaber, which we'll get to in a little bit here because it's kind of a big moment. But again, those types of things, I mean, I've really tried. Like, I went back and looked. The closest I could think is if you ever played Knights of the Old Republic 2, Sith Lords. There's two characters in it. The main character and this other Sith Lord, or is she a Sith? I can't remember. No, she's a Jedi. I can't remember her name, but they had a way they could talk over long distances, and they kind of had this special, unique bond. Nothing on this level. And again, you're talking about in the Old Republic stuff where people. I put a meme out there today where people would go out and eat worlds. I mean, that's how powerful these characters were. I mean, they were just beyond comprehension because of how long ago this was and how powerful the Force was and all that stuff. But there really is. It's kind of unprecedented. I don't know that we have anything that's ever been shown or anybody that's been able to display this sort of power. And then the big one, I guess, is later on. They are basically a health battery, right? They heal Palpatine. He's able to tap into whatever they have, that dyad, that Force, and able to kind of heal himself, regenerate himself, and get himself back up to fully charged kind of thing, and drain them and all that. So,
right,
really cool stuff. All right, let's talk about not so cool stuff. Let's talk about Rey's parents, because this is as a parent, I have a problem with this one, but the story that was being told here is that Rey's vision. So this is kind of, again, retrospectively looking at this now that we've seen 9. How does that play into 8? You've got Rey's parents essentially saying, "Look, we know the Emperor, my dad, Rey's father, my dad's looking for you, and I really feel like the best thing to do is take you to a desert planet, sell you off to this Unkurt Plout, who's probably a terrible person, and he is. We know he's a terrible person. And but don't worry, you'll be safe." And that's essentially what they say. He says in the movie, he says, "You'll be safe here, I promise." I don't know how he makes this promise, or what is it that he feels like he can promise, or what's going to happen. The conditions exist that she is 100% safe, and arguably, maybe she was, because they never found her. But it just seems like that was really the best choice as a parent, because Kylo Ren tells her they sold you to protect you, and I don't know. I just feel like they're the worst parents ever. But maybe I'm wrong.
Why does she need to be sold?
I don't know. Why?
I mean, usually just go stash them with a friend or something like that, right? Or like what they did with Luke and Leia. So I have no idea. This was, I think, again, this was, I don't want to call it sloppy, but it's more of a, again, we're just trying to tie up loose ends and try to do this and make it explain what we've seen when there's really not a great explanation for it based on where we're at. And, it's unfortunate. Again, these scenes end up being, at least for me, they ended up being a bit more throwaway. I think there's some people who, really enjoy these and feel like it really, adds something to it. But for me, it almost distracts from, from the greater story. It gives us a little idea, gives us a little motivation, but overall didn't really, her parents loved her. Cool. They were still descendants of Palpatine. So it's an interesting dynamic, but
yeah,
sorry.
No, you're fine. I agree. This is just stuff that I feel is like collateral damage in terms of like scripts and, last minute production stuff that we know was going on, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
probably just casualty stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. The other thing that's I mentioned this when we did the I think when we talked about The Last Jedi, this came up. We talked about it when we did the review, or at least when we talked about the first episodes after The Rise of Skywalker came out. But this idea that Palpatine, it doesn't feel like he really knows what he wants to do with Rey. Like one moment he's like, I bring her to me or as Snoke. He wants her, now then he wants her dead. Then he wants to train her. He wants to convert her. I mean, in this movie, we know, well, he contradicts himself even in this movie. But I guess what he lands on finally is, okay, I need her here. Bring her to me because she needs to perform this sacrifice in order for my essence to transfer into her, which essentially would be all the Sith transferring into her. And then I can live somehow vicariously through her or eventually take over her body. We don't know what that looks like.
Right.
But we know that he was tapping into this. We know that he was tapping into this immortal life kind of thing. And as a quick segue, there is the Dark Legends book that's coming out, which is, and I do have this one in front of me, so I'll pull it. This book here, there is actually a really cool story that kind of dives into this, and it's called Immortal Life or something like that. And it explains that this started thousands of years ago. There's a Sith Lord named Darth Noctis. And I don't know if I should be talking about that. I think I can. But Darth Noctis is kind of one of she realizes that this idea of searching for life everlasting has gone on for years and years and years. And she eventually makes her way to Exegol as well. And it's in Exegol that she finds some of the research that we know Palpatine now used in order to be eternal, right? Life eternal. And one of the requirements is there has to be a sacrifice. Again, it's explained in this book, so you can read it and you'll enjoy it. It's a really great story. But one of the components of life eternal is there has to be a sacrifice. And so this idea of, she needs to kill him, but it does need to be him accepting the death. And that's kind of a vital piece of it all. She couldn't just go kill him and not perform this ritual. It has to be part of the ritual that he goes through in order for this to happen. So to his credit, at least he got it right, and we understand where he's going. My problem is, and I guess where the big talking point for me really around this particular piece was just about how it seemed like he was going back and forth and like he really didn't know what he wanted. And if we take it at face value, he's always been in this apparatus, this Deus Ex Machina thing that allows him to be alive. So it seems like he would always have wanted her or someone to be there in order for the sacrifice to happen so that he could transfer in. But anyways, thoughts on Mr. Wishy-Washy and Gramps' indecisive.
That's what we talked about last week, right? I mean, he can't make his mind. It doesn't make sense. Some of the things he's saying, kill her, especially in The Last Jedi. He's like, he takes what he wants from her, and then he's going to offer right then and there. It seemed pretty clear. And actually, I'm glad you brought some of the book into this because that maybe helped answer some of my questions. I started thinking about like the Return of the Jedi, where he's goading Luke on to strike him down. And you see him, close his eyes and rest his head back. And I mean, we always viewed that as him sensing Luke's hatred and stuff. But is it possible that retrofitting a bit,
right,
that was this, did this have to happen on Exegol in order for the sacrifice to be this transference in order to happen? Or was that something he was trying to do with Luke back in Return of the Jedi, which made a lot of sense as well, right? Similar type of situation that we've got going on. And I just thought it was kind of an interesting question to pose or something to think about if that was possible or not. But yeah, I agree with you in general that, the inconsistency of what he wants to do with her and how she fits into the story. And we can always chalk it up to Palpatine always manipulating along the way and doing what needs to be said in order to motivate the characters in the right path and the right way in order to meet his objective and his ultimate plan.
Yeah.
And so I think we will just continue to give Palpatine all the credit in the world for being a really evil, nasty guy. Mike Rondo.
Mike Rondo. Yep. Okay, let's talk about Hux. Because again, we talked about this in Last Jedi. It felt like there was a really big kind of 180 for his character. Maybe not 180, but it was pretty close to 180. And in here, I don't know that they really did any more justice for him. He didn't really have a big part in it. He was the traitor, which was kind of hinted at early on. I still laugh every time that line of "I knew it" when he does that. I think it's the funniest thing in the world. I don't care if people hate it. I like that line. I think it's hilarious. But his character Hux is as being the traitor, and then he gets shot pretty unceremoniously a little bit later down the road. I mean, it felt like that was just kind of a mercy kill. Like, okay, we really don't know what else we're going to do with this character. He's no longer needed, but we can't just let him be. I don't know. Is that fair to say, or am I being
No,
too
it was
harsh
a
here?
mercy kill. But I thought they redeeming is a dangerous term, of course, but they gave some of the dignity back to the character. And I think there was one line in there that I really enjoyed for Hux. And it was his comment after Finn shoots him, why are you helping us? It was, he doesn't care who wins. He just wants Kylo Ren to lose.
You're right.
And I think that comment right there, for me, I was like, I'm satisfied with where this character ended up in this moment. And they didn't, they redeemed some of the childish type of behaviors we had to tolerate with Last Jedi. We still got some of the nervousness at the beginning with the helmet, Kylo asking him if his appearance disturbs him or something to that effect. And we still get the nervousness, good show, basically. And I like that. I thought it was a good dynamic to say, okay, yeah, he still has that, but he's a more serious character and let's take him more seriously. And he had a really, really good line there. And and then let's off him.
Right. Yeah.
Good show, old boy.
Yeah. See you later. Lay down there. Okay. Let's move to Kefbir. So this is the planet or the moon, the water moon that surrounds Endor.
Right.
And there's a couple things that happen here. Some obviously very big things. When we talked about Dark Ray just a little bit earlier. We didn't necessarily talk about that, but I mean, I guess the big moment here really is the Kylo Ren versus Rey fight. And what that was like. Visually, I still like that fight. I mean, I don't know that it ranks up in there as one of my favorites all time, but visually with the water and the style, the way it was shot. I mean, he does a lot of really long shots, which I think are great because it kind of gives you a sense of scale, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, and it ultimately ends with, Leia dying, doing whatever she needed to do, her last moment there to get Ben to wake up or Ben to reemerge 100%. And it allowed Rey to kill, maybe not physically, but I guess
mortally wound. Yeah.
Mortally wound, right? I think she mortally wounds Ben Solo, Kylo Ren. I think there's some symbolism there in her killing off Kylo Ren at that point. Excuse me. And then we get more of the Force healing, which you're going to talk a little bit later about. But I think the big moment here is that really, she says, "I did want to take your hand." I mean, that's the special moment there between them. And that all kind of builds up into, which I think is my favorite scene out of this trilogy, really. My favorite scene out of this trilogy is that moment where he's standing there looking off into the distance, really thinking about everything that had just happened and who he was, still having maybe the slightest amount of doubt in his mind about whether or not this was the right path. And I think that gets distinguished by, Han Solo, or maybe that's in his head. We don't know. But that moment between him, Han Solo, and Kylo Ren, and then finally him turning around and throwing that thing off as kind of symbolic of this is the last remaining piece of Kylo Ren, this character, this persona that I've been, this person who I thought I was, this person that's really not me, him throwing that off into this great sea. I mean, there's all kinds of symbolism in all of that there, but I think that was, for me, probably my favorite moment. But your thoughts on, I guess all.
Well, yeah, and you love the father-son dynamic in general, which you've spoken quite a bit about over the years. And I think to kind of go back to your original, when you were kind of framing it up, we have to see all of these Force abilities from Rey, these terrific jumps, and she's leaping over the water. But we get this stalking presence from Kylo Ren. He just emerges from the water and just looking bigger and badder than ever, changes the way he's holding the lightsaber, his grip there, and his stance. And we just have this looming figure that reminds you of Vader in many ways, right? Of just, it's this unstoppable force that just keeps coming, and it's just this cold and calculated, and it just wears you down over time, and that she doesn't really stand a chance, and she's already, drained a bit from her encounter with the serpent. And so I like that. I like that view of it as well. I mean, it's not just all the water and things like that was always fantastic, but just this stalking presence really tied back, I think, to other aspects of the trilogy where you just have this looming figure that you can't escape. And Rogue One, of course, is a great example of that at the very end. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. This is one of the better scenes in this trilogy overall. The interaction with Leia, her Rey seizing the opportunity and then instantly regretting it, right? And instantly knowing what happened as soon as she senses Leia just a moment later.
Mm-hmm.
And just the gravity of that scene, and then for Han to come back and help Kylo, finally regain himself as Ben Solo and cast off, what he didn't think he could or what he couldn't do, just a year or so prior. It is a really powerful moment, and we got to see Harrison Ford again. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it was just a great and powerful scene. And we got more into the spoilers on this. I think at least I did for the first time, and we kind of knew this was happening, but it's one of those things you were pointing out last week. Until you see it, you question like that. There's no way this is going to work.
Yeah.
And then here it is. It's one of our favorite scenes in the movie, and potentially in all three of these movies. And it's just a really great and powerful scene. I think from a lot of different angles, you could really pick this apart from probably 3 or 4 different perspectives with Han, Leia, and Ben and Rey, all different points of view, which I think is really a lot of fun. I mean, Finn yelling at Rey again over and over and over, but
he does love it,
right? Yeah, I'm not going to suspend my belief again here, where Rey gets across all of this and she's a Force user, and then Finn and Janice somehow find a way of doing it too. But anyway,
it takes them a lot longer. I don't know. Yeah.
Sure.
They
fantastic scene. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I would say too, like I know we mentioned this in the last episode, but as great as I think it was to see on film, I think the book does a better job of maybe not visually showing this, because I think they did a great job with the special effects here, but like you said, the different perspectives from all of the characters and kind of what's happening simultaneously that you don't get in the movie, right. What's going on in Luke's mind or what Luke is doing in this moment, right? That's an aspect that you do not get in the movie. But what Luke is doing and what Leia's thinking and what Kylo Ren's thinking, I mean, all that I think is done really well. But I think Ray Carson does a great job of kind of throwing all that together for you in the novelization. So,
right.
All right. And at some point, I think we'll do a redemption show. I think we need to do it. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's in the backlog of shows to do. So we will come back to that. Because again, we could spend 30 minutes. We could do a whole show again on just redemption and redemption arcs and whether this is the right thing, whether you like it, not, all that stuff. So let's move to Octo. And this is where, again, what's that? Yeah, I still don't know how to pronounce it because no one ever says the freaking name of it. But this is, we're not going to get into what we talked about last week with him catching the lightsaber and a Jedi's weapon, that stuff. Depending on your point of view, it's either someone saying that was the wrong thing to do and I'm writing it, or you can take the view of, no, he's learned his lesson that when he sat down with Yoda got through to that guy and told him, this is not what you need to do. And now this is him showing that, displaying that, right? Being the leader that Yoda wanted. However you want to take it, totally cool either way, but we're not going to talk about that. I think the more interesting, maybe not the more interesting, but one of the more interesting things, or an interesting thing, is Rey saying that she's going to do what Luke did. And this is one where I kind of struggle, like, okay, so really, would she do this? And depending on the day and depending on my mood, I can make a defense one way or the other. In the defense of it, I would say that she doesn't really know Luke that well. She didn't know him very long. She knows what he did. And if you suspend disbelief again and you take everything at face value, it's really not that hard for her to get to this point to say, you're right, I'm out too. I can't do this by myself. I am not Luke Skywalker. I'm not a legend. I can't bear the burden of the entire galaxy. And I can't be the savior of the entire galaxy, because that's essentially what she is at the end of The Last Jedi. Because, I mean, Leia notwithstanding, she is the Last Jedi. She's the one person that needs to be able to bring back the Jedi Order. And now she's got to go kill Palpatine, who she's just found out is her grandfather, right? Same kind of dynamics there from Luke and and Return of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi, where he's like, I can't kill my father, right?
Right.
So all that's kind of playing into it. So I think it's easy for you to kind of again make a defense as to why she would make the same decisions. I just don't know that that really is the Rey that I would have written or the Rey that I want.
Well, I think we got to look at where she is at this moment, though. You know, she lost control, thought she killed Chewie, right? At one point, I know we've got past all of that, but I think this is where you have to take these kind of cumulative moments, though. Of she can't seem to make the right decision. She can't seem to maintain control. She can't. She can't. She's all this. I can't. You know, all of this negativity, and all this fear, and then she doesn't trust her. She doesn't take Leia's advice of don't be afraid of who you are. Right. And so it's all of these moments that have just added up to where you're right. She just checks out. She's like, to your point, I can't do this. I can't do it on my own. I'm not ready. There's no way that I've got this power and I cannot control it. And if I go down this path, if I leave this place, I will ascend the throne and I will become what I'm most afraid of becoming. And so I view it from that angle. I mean, her going there makes sense when you lose hope, right? And that's kind of what Luke did. You know, he lost that hope. You could say it was stripped away from him, but he contributed to that himself. And I think that's what Rey is experiencing here, where she can't control what's happening and she's losing control, and her frustrations and everything else are just continue to come through.
Yeah. There's if you go back and listen to the Return, or watch either way, the Return of the Jedi episode we did, I think my moment there was kind of talking about fear and how this was kind of a vital component of the Jedi, that they need to confront fear. It's almost like a recipe of sorts that all Jedi need to go through, a rite of passage. Maybe this is the modern version of the trials in this new era of the, post the prequel trilogy type stuff, or post Order 66. But there's, I like the fact that Rey does confront her fears in all three of these movies. She does confront her fear of facing Kylo Ren in the first one. She does it again in the second one in a different way. And it's certainly the perspective's a little bit different for her, but she does have to confront that fear of facing him. And then ultimately the fear of whether or not this guy's going to turn on her, and whether she's going to be able to convert him. And then in this movie, we get the same kind of thing where she's got to confront the fear of the bad guy. But now it's the different angle here. The different take is that it's someone that is her blood. And Luke has that moment where he's, says that some things are stronger than blood. But this all seems to play into that idea that, at least in the sequel trilogy and the original trilogy, that becoming a Jedi and donning that title really is about confronting your fears. And I think it was a great moment that they had, that he does acknowledge that that she's going to have to face her greatest fear, and that her greatest fear right now is that she is a Palpatine. And to just kind of add on to that, I love the idea that Leia did know that she was a Palpatine. Right. I love the idea that she was able to never say that. And again, you can chalk this off as, well, they just made this up, or else they went on. That's fine. I don't care. I still like it. It works. I think it works. I think it works for Leia's character too. I think she is somebody that would say, I'm going to look past the fact that she's this, because I've already lost my son and I want to make the most of this. I want her to be a better person. I want her to not have that kind of shadow looming over her head. And I think she's better off for it now.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I mean, we get Luke finally admit, that he was wrong, and to finally give her kind of that guidance of, look, we all have to do this. I think that what I took away from some of the scene was that it's not confronting fear one time and being over and that's it. And you've done it, you've achieved it, go Jedi. Mm-hmm. It's this aspect that you will continue to come across this in different ways as you continue to progress. And this is what Luke lost sight of and had to regain this perspective. And then unfortunately didn't pass it to Rey earlier, but eventually passed it to her to help her get over this hurdle here, and to understand and give her that confidence boost that she really needed to kind of get back in the game. But I'm with you. I really do like that Leia had a choice, and that Leia knew that she was a Palpatine, and that she viewed it as a spirit. Because of who you are, where you come from doesn't necessarily dictate who you are, who you can be, or who you will become. And I think that was the general comment of, she saw your spirit, right? And and her spirit. And we see this throughout the movies. I think when we think back to Force Awakens and the very innocent character that we saw and how she was willing to help everybody, how she was willing to help BB-8 and take care and defend people and defend a droid that she barely knows, and we see those moments and we know that she's got a good heart and that she can overcome these things. And she's just, she just has to have the courage to do it. And then, and the faith that she's, that she can do it and that she believes in herself and that she's not afraid to push herself forward and let go of the things that everyone wants to tell her. It was the same with Luke and Jedi. This is your destiny. I mean, how many times did we hear it?
Yeah.
Between Vader and Palpatine, and it was crammed down your throat. You think you believe it after a time, but you have to have the strength to resist that.
Yep. Yeah. No. Good point. The Leia's training. So for those of us that have been fans of Legends for a long time and kind of know where Leia went to eventually, this was a great moment for us to be able to see something of what that training looked like officially in canon. I think, I walk away from the novelization more than the movie. I walk away from the novelization with this idea that she was probably more powerful. If not, she had more potential than Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And maybe because she was the older child, I don't know. Maybe there's something there. No, that's a joke. But she does seem like do you ever think, and this is really stupid and silly, but you ever think they actually went back and tried to do the midichlorian counts? Do you think, my guess is Luke found something and found the science or the whatever that talked about how there's some direct correlation between midichlorian counts and your ability to use the Force or your power in the Force. And do you think he ever went back and did any testing? Do you think that was ever a thing and confirmed that she had some higher count than he did?
I honestly don't even know how to answer this question, Albert. and I'm actually beside myself that we're having this conversation now because
I just want to talk about midichlorians. Can you tell?
Right. Yeah. I'm going to go with no.
No. Okay. Next, let's think.
Luke thought it was all BS.
All right. That's fair. We're going to do a midichlorian show. I promise you. I keep saying that, but we're going to do one. I've got a lot of thoughts around it.
To your point about Leia, though, yeah, the book does a really fantastic job of definitely basically telling you that they had different Force abilities, but it certainly suggested that she was the stronger of the two in certain ways, I think. But I like that they were very complementary type of skill sets. They didn't have overlap. And in the book, it did a really nice job of saying, Luke was excited to learn from Leia, where she was viewing him as a bit arrogant and things like that, and we had him pull back from that and say, no, I'm excited to learn from you now as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's drawn on the book a bit, but I agree. Those was a really cool scene to see on screen, though. I was really glad they made this work.
Yep.
The book really enhances it too.
Yeah. It was one of my favorite moments, I think, from the movie, just being able to see that. And I think if I remember correctly, I'm trying to remember what wording, I think they use it. They think they said it came more natural to her was how it was explained.
Yep.
Whether that equates to being more powerful, I don't know, but another discussion for another time. But yeah.
It helped explain some of the stuff in Last Jedi to an extent.
Yes.
So
yeah,
it's worth going in there and listening to that or reading it if anybody has the opportunity.
So let's talk about the Rise of Red 5. That was one of the things. I'm just going to put this out there. I called this a long time ago. I called it for Last Jedi. It didn't happen. And I felt really disappointed that it did. But we did get to see it in Rise of Skywalker. That's all I'm going to say.
So I got a question for you.
Oh boy.
Okay. On Octo, wasn't the door part of the X-Wing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just leave it at that then.
Just roll with it, man. We've got other things to...
I've got to suspend everything else.
I know. It's come up. It's come up, and I think I don't know the maybe one of our watchers, viewers, listeners, whatever will know, but I'm almost positive this came up, and it was somebody from the story group that explained this, that it was a part of it, and I think someone was like, well, it's from the wing, and then they debunked that and said, no, it's not actually from the wing, it's from a different part, and that if you look closely, it does show that it's missing in one scene, and I don't know. Again, this is one of those things that yes, I get what you're saying. I know you're not hung up on it, but people.
Okay. So, Utini, you have a homework assignment because you like to pick things apart for us and help us out with some of this stuff. So, Utini, help research this and find this for us of where this missing part came from. Screenshot or didn't exist.
Yeah. People are Googling right now, I guarantee you.
This is next week's trivia question.
Yeah, exactly. Can't take note of that. Okay, let's move to the Battle of Exegol. We got to see Rey be tempted as Empress Palpatine. He even calls her that.
Right.
He says, "I haven't come to lead the Sith. She says, I haven't come to lead the Sith. I actually come to destroy them." And Palpatine has this question of, as a Jedi, he seems to be so hung up on this idea. And again, I don't know. It's probably nothing. It's probably just one of those things that as they're writing this, they don't realize they are. Or maybe it is a conscious thing, but it just seems like he is so obsessed with somebody killing him, but not just somebody ending him, a Jedi in particular ending him. And I've never heard a good explanation as to why this is. Again, it could just be that it's common, or it's coincidence, I guess, that they've always written this. But he says, as a Jedi. And I guess the question is, why is this so important? Why is it important that a Jedi is coming to him? Did he have some vision that someday a Jedi would be the one that ends his life? And so he's been really on edge that anybody that's running around with the Jedi title, and maybe that's why he wiped all of them out, because at some point he foresaw his destiny being death at the hands of a Jedi without any particulars.
Right. And Jedi represent hope in the galaxy, right? I mean, we've established that in Last Jedi. I think the other thing, though, I didn't quite look at it from this perspective, so I'm trying to think through this, but it's interesting that a Jedi would have to be the one to kill him if that were the case. I think that would be actually neat, because there's a correlation with that with the crystals, and bleeding the crystals. You have to kill a Jedi as a rite of passage, take their crystal or take their lightsaber and take their crystal and then bleed it, right? It's how they have to acquire it. And so I kind of like this link between those two of, not only do you have to kill the Jedi in order to achieve a certain, rank, I guess, if you will, or a certain accomplishment, but one needs to strike you down in order to corrupt them and corrupt the light side, if you will, in order to have them ascend and have the Sith reborn into effect. So I kind of like that connection there. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but that's kind of fun thinking about on the fly. What do you think about that?
I like it. I think it makes more sense than what I have in my head, which is it was all coincidental. I think you put good reason and rhyme behind it. So we've talked about Palpatine's plan for immortal life and all that. I think we've touched on that. I think the only lingering question that I had in the notes, at least, was, had Ben not showed up, like, what was Rey's plan? And we don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't even touch it. Let's just, I'm going to throw it out there. If you guys want to comment on that, and certainly in the channel now, or if you want to drop us comments in any of the ways you get this, I'm curious as to what people think. Like, what would have been her contingency? Because at that point, when she showed up, she wasn't expecting Ben to show up. He just did, and that was a pretty, obviously a game changer. But she was right there, and I don't know, was she going to just do it? And what would that have been?
Yeah, because she was losing the fight. She was losing the mental battle at the very least. So,
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a great question. I'd love to see all the responses we got.
Yeah. We got to see Rose and Finn. I don't know. We're not going to really touch much about this, but this is, again, more collateral damage, if you will. She saves him in the last movie at the very last minute. And then in this movie, she's kind of, he's running off to go kill himself again. She's like, okay, good luck. Like, no big deal.
No, she had to run schematics on old Star Destroyers that they already know how to kill.
Right.
But whatever.
Yeah. No, I don't know if that worked. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever see any more of this relationship, but I think it's kind of dead, Jim. Another one. Kylo versus the Knights of Ren.
Yeah. Oh man, we didn't talk about our boy band establishing shot on Pasana.
Oh no, we did it when we covered it originally. We covered
greatest scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Bye.
No. So I have a lot of problems with the Knights of Ren in general.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
They're a huge disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is all going back to just the what's the word? I don't know. Discombobulated storyline that we've got. But that's not the point. The point of this is it does seem still a lot of character that he has a relationship with these guys. We know that. We've seen his relationship in the comics. And we probably are going to see more, I would guess, at some point. But here they are. They're on Exegol. He shows up, and there isn't a moment of dialogue between any of them at all. Right. And maybe it happens. It wasn't in the novel, right? We didn't get anything in the novelization. But I have a really hard time wrapping my head around the fact that he's had this relationship with them. They know who he is, and there wouldn't be some kind of dialogue or banter going back and forth with the Knights of Ren, because we know they do speak. Right? They're all Force sensitive. They're just human beings. They're no different than us. They've got a relationship with him. He was their leader. He was just leading them not that long ago, and nothing happened. But I mean, again, it's not am I losing sleep over it? No, but it just feels weird that wouldn't have happened.
Well, there's a question mark in there. I think some of it is, and was it the book? I think that did this, the mantle of leadership with the helmet, I believe, or something to that effect, was important for them. Whoever had the mantle, they would lead, or they would follow, really without question. There was undying loyalty of sorts. And as soon as he shed all of that, then those loyalties went out the window.
Yeah.
And that's about as far as I've been able to get onto it of why, I don't know. And they needed a roadblock to stall him getting to Rey, and of course, past the lightsaber. So logistically in the movie, you got to do a few things. But it doesn't make sense in order for them to kind of, they're there at every turn too. I mean, that's the other thing. They're just at every turn. And so who do they really answer to? Do they really answer to Palpatine? Because that kind of works against the Knights of Ren, like the legend of it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So no, you're not losing sleep over it. Or no, at least not the wrong way, but
not anymore. I'm much better now. Thank you.
It was a cool fight, and we got a lightsaber fight out of it, which was neat.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's still one of my favorite scenes, and that that moment of like levity where he like does the thing, and then does. I mean, that whole scene.
Well, in the bound, yeah. Well, and we get to see. This was. I was watching this. The comment was made was there's so much life to Ben Solo in the scene now, right? And we didn't see this kind of energy in this. There's this aura about him now. That we got to see with the battle with the Knights of Ren finally that we hadn't seen before, which I thought was really great and really set the tone and helped us understand who Ben Solo truly was and what he represented, kind of what he looked like, what he was capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got, obviously he does that. We get them confronting, Palpatine. All of this is great stuff. The only complaint really here is just the coloring, all the blue that's washed out. And I don't know if that's a style thing that J.J. Abrams wanted to do or whatever, but it was great to see them together. I still get chills every time they both turn and face and the blue lightsabers come up, and knowing that those are Luke and Leia's. I mean, that's Star Wars, in my opinion. It's a great moment. The whole idea of that they're the dyad and that they're standing together, dying together, that makes sense at this point. And then, we talked about the life force bond kind of healing them. From that, we transition over into the big Lando moment with him coming in and saying they're more of us. Again, this feels very Star Wars. This feels very, they're just Ewoks, right? In Return of the Jedi, these are just people that show up. And this is Star Wars. This is the DNA of Star Wars, is that everyday people can do great things if they're inspired to do so, which was kind of the message of this whole movie and Poe Dameron's speech and all that, right?
Right. And Last Jedi too. That was the premise there towards the end.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. They were kind of they set a lot of the groundwork there to kind of get to this point here for sure. And but the question and one of the things that gets debated a lot these days is, okay, why Lando? He says, Lando, you did it. Ben yells that out, and I think people take that at face value. Maybe give Lando way too much credit. I don't think that he really meant that it was Lando per se specifically that did it. I mean, someone had to do things, right? Take some physical actions in order to bring everybody together. But I really feel like it was a combination of things. And this doesn't get discussed in the books. It doesn't obviously get touched on in the movie. They just say, Lando, you did it. But really, it's a combination of things. It was one, Luke sacrificing himself, right? The legendary Luke Skywalker taking on the Empire one final time. That was riling everybody up, getting everybody, I guess what I'm saying is a year from The Last Jedi, we're in a different place. And it did take somebody finally like a Lando, like a war hero, legend, whatever, to finally capture on that momentum, capture on the spirit, capture on the desire that everybody has, the rebellious nature of all of them now, for finally putting their foot down, saying, we don't want any more of this, and then loading up the minivan and heading out to follow Lando Calrissian to go take on, an infinite amount of Star Destroyers with Death Star tech. But I guess anyway, any thoughts on that particular scene when he comes in and we get to see Babu Freak? And I mean, visually, it's freaking amazing. I just love all of those ships and the amount of work that went into that.
We get to see the ghost. That was cool.
Yeah, we get to see the ghost.
Suspend belief yet again. It's more like, how did he do it? It's just, to your point, like, just how was it possible? How did he do it? You still got to round everybody up and tell them where to go and get them the coordinates. And that's a lot of ships to go through that pretty narrow passage that we saw both Rey and Kylo running through. But Yeah, it's epic, right? It's the grandiose battle that we were, hoping to see. How else are you going to tackle that many Star Destroyers? So it makes a lot of sense. But it was fun, and having the Falcon come down visually was just fantastic fun, and be able to see that. But I don't really have much to add to it because it's just one of those moments that, like you said, is very Star Wars of everyone comes together at the end to make a difference, and they're able to turn the tide once some things go their way.
Yep. We got to see the yeet of the whole trilogy, and that was Ben Solo flying down into the abyss there. That was a moment. The Force lightning in the sky. This is where I felt like, man, Palpatine's doing things that he's never done before, and I don't know if that was because he's recharged by the dyad. They never really explain all this, but I think it's safe to say he is on another level of power at this point in what he was able to do. Of course, we get the moment where Rey falls down. We get the "Be With Me," which I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit because I really want to kind of just break that scene, the "Be With Me" scene, just line by line, and talk about who was saying what and why. And then we get the, I'm all the Sith, I'm all the Jedi. Do you ever take that? Did you take that literally, or do you take that literally? Has anything changed for you that they really were saying that I'm all the Jedi, and I'm all the Sith, and this is the new Star Wars, or this is what Jedi, the type of Jedi and Sith that we are, or was it more symbolic of that?
I think, yeah, it was probably more symbolic, but I mean, we're certainly given, especially for Rey, that there is something within her that she is building strength on. But again, the dialogue that we get from all of the characters that show up, Obi-Wan and Anakin, and they're just encouraging her to pull from the Force everything that that she has inside of her, and that she has everything that she needs in order to do it. Or is it that she's pulling from the Force and they're somehow channeling that into it? I think is an interesting question. And I like the idea of all the Sith and all the Jedi, though. I think that's a neat idea to explore, that you have, that you are the cumulative nature of everything that has come before you, and that you really are that. And it seems to suggest it with Palpatine, right? Because like you said, we're seeing epic scale of Force lightning and his ability. And now he's been recharged. So you could say some of this is from the dyad. There's something unique about all of that as well. But I kind of like that dichotomy. Like he's doing things that are unseen before, and then Rey somehow has to battle that. And is one person really enough to confront that and to actually defeat it? And you could see where it kind of takes a village of Force ghosts, dead people, in order to do it.
Yeah. You're going to talk a little bit more about this again in just a second here, but this is, the Rey's death and her rebirth, and how that comes about with Kylo Ren, or sorry, Ben Solo at this point. And we're not going to break this down because we've talked about it ad nauseum in some of the other shows, but I mean, the idea that they kissed, it just is. Accept it, right? Redemption, right. It just happened. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it, how it happened, it just is at this point. It is canon. Ben and Leia's death, I think that was it's a pretty pivotal moment in seeing that they both died, obviously for different reasons, and it's kind of a sweet, kind of tender moment, but it also at the same time very sad.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Do you think Leia was waiting for Ben?
Yeah.
And that's why she didn't?
Yeah. If you go back and listen to, I think it was when we talked about, I think it was so Michaela and I did a novelization episode on Leia. Mm-hmm. So Leia only from the novelization. And we kind of just broke down all of her moments and that sort of thing. And it was in there that I kind of made the case that she was waiting for her son. So I don't want to spoil that, but yes, the short answer is yeah. If you want to know more of my thoughts on theory on how that happens, go check out that episode. I really enjoyed doing that one and kind of talking about Leia, because I think they did a great job with her character in the novelization, which, to be fair, they probably couldn't do because of obvious reasons in the movie. So
sure.
But the one thing that we get from the novelization that we don't get in the movie is this line of "I will always be with you." So after Ben Solo dissipates, becomes a Force ghost, she hears that voice say, "I will always be with you," and then she whispers back under her breath, "No one's ever really gone," calling back to obviously the line from The Last Jedi. So this idea that they are still together, which you would expect, right? I mean, if they're a dyad in the Force, I don't think that the physical life is really going to be able to separate them. So what that looks like going forward in Star Wars, I don't know. I don't know that we will ever see that. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But, we'd be remiss by not saying that they are still together in some way.
Right.
Okay, celebration and victory. Let's wrap this up. So we get to the very end. We've got Lando and Janna. There's, maybe that's part of what we talked about earlier being the new spinoff series. We'll find out very soon. I enjoyed the Rey, Finn, and Poe hug. Like
Yeah.
it's grown on me. I didn't really care. Like I wasn't. I didn't not care about it when it happened, but it just never really had an impact on me. I was like, okay, cool, yeah, that makes sense. Over the last 6 months now, and maybe I'm just getting soft in my old age here, but it does feel very different. Like it's not the same kind of moment for me as the original characters or, what we see from the prequel trilogy type stuff, some of the nicer moments there, but it does feel like I feel satisfied to call back to our very first opening thing about what Abrams was trying to accomplish, right? He wanted fans just to simply be satisfied. That moment for me is at least satisfactory. I actually enjoy that now.
Right.
Them kind of having that moment all together.
Well, and coming into this movie, Abrams was, we made a big deal about bringing the three characters back together. That was really important to do. Finn and Poe in particular, but really all three characters to be able to bring them back for a while. Of course, they then disperse a bit. But yeah, to have this one last moment of kind of where it all kind of feels like for us, at least, where it all kind of began and end.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the social media post that they had at the end of shooting. I believe this was one of those moments where everyone kind of got hit in the feels a little bit about that. Yeah, this is really all kind of coming to an end. And yeah, it was just a sweet moment, amidst all the other celebration that we had. It was just these three somehow amidst all this excitement, more of an intimacy between these three that was difficult to really quantify. But the more you see it, kind of the more you understand it, the more you feel it a little bit. And it really is just more of this feeling rather than something you can describe.
Yeah.
But I think it was just really, yeah. I mean, it's just touching and intimate.
Yep. Chewie's medal. So my thing is, so I'm as some of you guys know, I'm not plugging the show, but I do a Ready Player One podcast as well. And on that, we're actually talking about this in one of the chapters, in chapter 7, I think, or chapter 8. They're talking about how Chewie got the shaft and never got his medal. And when I saw this movie, I never really saw it as Chewie getting a kind of a concession token of like, oh, here you go, here's a medal. I always saw this as being like, okay, this was something that belonged to somebody that was very important to you, and I'm giving you this medal now because if anybody should own this, it's you. And that's really all I took at it. For some reason, there have been a lot of people that have run with this and said, oh, this is just, they're making up for things, or that seems really kind of, it flies in the face of Chewie, and it's very disrespectful that he's getting this token medal now. I don't think that was the case. And I think in reading the novelization, that was a lot of that was 100% confirmed for me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I could see where some people would take that at face value. But again, I'm with you 100% on this one, where it was something that Leia gave to Han. Leia got this back from Han after his death. And now that she's gone, it's only natural that two of the 3 or 4 people that Chewie cares the most about over the course of the last 40 years or few decades.
Right.
This is that, besides the Falcon, I guess, this is some sort of, not a token, but just a memento of sorts of something to remember them by. And then something that from a time in their life where things were simpler and things were brighter maybe. And something that really only Chewie could appreciate. And of course it really means all the more coming from Maz.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
I couldn't not put something in about that character.
Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, no, I don't agree with that last part, but I agree with everything else prior to that.
It was a very touching moment between them though.
Yeah. Okay, sure. But
come on.
No. Okay, fine. I'll give you that. Whatever. Stop it. Okay. So her giving her that medal. Yes. And I think what it also signifies is for those two characters, this was a very, very significant turning point in their personal lives and then their relationship as a pair, right? Prior to that, they were at least Han Solo was every man for themselves, including me. Then it was, okay, I'll trust in this one particular person, even though I shouldn't be trusting in anybody. He did find faith in Chewbacca, and for the longest time, it was just them. And then together, they made the conscious decision together to join the rebellion and help out, right? So it is significant in that it does represent that turning point in their lives where they made a big character development and growth as a best friend duo or individually as people as well. So maybe more Han Solo than Chewbacca, but because Chewbacca was already fighting with in Clone Wars. But anyways, so yeah, I think that was it was poignant at least, and it certainly represents something. Okay, the final moments of the movie, burying the lightsabers, and Rey Skywalker. I guess the obvious questions are why bury the lightsabers and why take the name of Skywalker.
I honestly don't know why she buried the lightsabers.
Okay,
seems like kyber crystals are a bit of a
rarity,
short supply.
Maybe she pulled them out.
But would the lightsabers mean anything then? Because I mean, the attachment, at least if we, well,
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember how much of this is canon. Back from the old Ilum. I think this is the original Clone Wars, where there was the way that a Jedi attaches to their, basically only one crystal is shown to them, and that's the one that they can, that's the one that they go and pick. Yeah. There's a connection between them of sorts. But yeah, I really don't understand. I mean, it was symbolic, I suppose, returning where it began, although that's not where Leia really began or ever touched foot on that soil, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused there, but I mean, it's significant to us as fans, of course, and it's significant for Luke Skywalker in particular, and for Anakin as well, to come home of sorts and to lay that to rest. But then you're right. Then we get the rekindling of the Skywalker name, and maybe without the blood, without the bloodline, the Skywalker name can now evolve into something different, or something better, or maybe what it could be. But again, it's symbolic of how people view the name, I think, across the galaxy. And it's one of those, rays of hope. No pun intended. Sorry.
Right, I see what you did there.
Yeah, that really wasn't intentional. But, it's just one of those moments where you can say, okay, is it, her adopting the name is because it's a very kind of altruistic type of idea, but there's a lot of impurity with the name as well. But I like that she was able to overcome it. I don't mind her taking the name. I think that's interesting, choosing the family that you want or that you fit in, rather than just accepting what you were born into. And I think that's kind of the takeaway at the end of the day.
Yeah. And that's been the message of Star Wars. Go back and look at Legends, go back and look at anything canon.
And Rebels is a great example.
Rebels and Ezra. Yeah. I mean, that's all, it is Star Wars, whether you like it or not. It is just Star Wars taking on that. It's about it's about who you are, not where you came from. And that's kind of what's happening here. I mean, there's been so much discourse around this, and it really is, it's as simple, whether you agree with it or not, it's as simple as she had two masters and she decided to don't take that name. She didn't want to have the Palpatine name. Very similar to what Leia went through, right? After Return of the Jedi, she didn't want people to know that she was of the Skywalker line. And she went to great lengths to kind of keep that as secret, as private as possible, because of fear of what would happen. And Rey has an opportunity here. She doesn't know what she knows what her last name is, but people don't know who she is. And so, Skywalker, sure, why not? Not a big deal. She took it. Okay. Let's get into our final stories, because we've got an hour left on the show. No, I'm kidding. We're not going 3 hours. But let's start with the I know you want to talk about the Force healing and just kind of, wax some stuff around that. But go ahead.
Yeah, this is one of the things that this is an idea that came from Legends or Expanded Universe, which I thought was always really cool, of transferring life force, but it comes at a cost. And I think that's the part that I wanted to more focus on, is that just bringing things back, or just healing things. Let's just focus on healing, just focusing on the healing aspect of things, that there's some cost and there's some drain that puts on you. And I think they did a good job with Rey throughout the movie, where it doesn't feel like she's quite as sharp as she continues to do this, right? She's not as strong. She is a bit weaker as a result. And she's wearing down, especially when we see that with the fight with Kylo Ren after she's healed the serpent. She's just not near strong. But the other aspect of it that I thought was interesting, though, is the idea of bringing someone back to life. And this is something that Palpatine, of course, kind of postulated to Anakin about being able to save someone from death.
Yeah. Right.
And keeping them from dying. So it's a bit of an extension of that opera discussion that they had in Revenge of the Sith. And that we've established that there's a cost when you do this lends a lot of credibility to why it cost Ben Solo his life when he decided to sacrifice himself for Rey and ending this aspect of the Skywalker line, if you will, which I think was a bit poetic in some ways. But it's important to say that there's a consequence for what you're going to do, I think, right? And I think that's the part that I think if Ben was to survive after doing this, it would lessen the impact and the draw it took on Rey earlier in the film. And I'm appreciative. Whether you like that Ben died or not, take that out of it a bit. This is kind of how this stuff would presumably work. Mm-hmm. That it's kind of this give a life for a life, right? And who's the one that should survive, I guess, if you will. That might not be a very popular comment, but in Ben's eyes, it was a gift he could give to Rey because she's a bit purer in spirit than he is, and this was his way of, I think, accepting that fate of saying, okay, this is the way that we are supposed to end, and we can live on through this other person who can hopefully achieve the things that we were never really quite able to achieve as a family. So that was kind of in a nutshell. It was a bit more generic in some areas, but I just thought it was very nice that there was a cost and there's a consequence. I think those are things that we always have to view in life in general. Of, when you're going to do something, there's an effect. So right. Are you willing to pay that price?
Yeah. And I think, so I don't know if I'll say this from a Reylo perspective, only because, and I never claimed to be one. I keep really good company.
One. Right.
I have a lot of people that I keep in contact with that. And I think I think one of the more, interesting aspects about all of that in terms of his death and why that happened is this idea that, he was mortally wounded as much as she was. He right. found in him some way to make it up, the abyss, crawl all the way back out there. We know he was mortally wounded on near death, brink of death kind of thing. And he had an opportunity here to really just to kind of keep, self-preservation or transfer whatever little life he had left in him into her in order for her to live. And I think that was kind of what it was. It was the ultimate sacrifice. It's very similar. I mean, it parallels Vader, right? Vader was mortally wounded, coming from the, I wouldn't say mortally wounded, but he was certainly beat down by Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. Right. And he had an opportunity there to potentially sacrifice his own life, which turned out to be the case, and give himself up, ultimately allowing that redemption to kind of happen. But he was able to give his own life in order to save a life, and to save a life for somebody that he loved, to save a life for somebody he felt like, to your point, had more potential, was going to do greater things, could do greater things, had lived a very, a different life than he had, who would, and we talked about this in a number of other episodes prior to, but just, and I think you mentioned it tonight too, but Rey's, ability she is by definition a Jedi, right? They were very selfless. We hear that from Anakin in the prequel trilogy about how the Jedi are selfless. And this was as about a selfless act as you can make, giving your life for somebody else. And the fact that he gave it to Rey, being that they were a dyad and, they've obviously got more than just platonic relationship here at this point. I think that was really kind of what was going on here. And he gave whatever life he had left so that she could go on and live and continue with the line and all that. I don't buy into this whole thing about her being pregnant. I mean, that's all like fringe theories out there, right? I mean, that's not.
That was a joke. That was a joke we made early on.
I know, and it's crazy that people are just so hung up on this stuff, and I just don't prescribe to any of that stuff. So, anyways, yeah, I would agree. And it's in the force healing thing has always been around. That's a crazy thing. I think back to like the original. I think I mentioned this before on a previous episode as well. But the original West End Games role-playing game had this concept of force healing, and there was all kinds of variations that you could do and all of that. And it never really took away or consumed your life or made you weaker in any way, but it was out there. And we saw that in Legends. In Legends, it happened a bit. We had never really seen it to this point.
Right. Yeah, New Jedi Order. Yeah, New Jedi Order, I think it was more of a meditation, a meditative healing trance of sorts, where you had to go deep into the force in order to rejuvenate, basically.
Yep.
But again, there wasn't a real cost except you were exposed.
Yeah. The going back, and now this is retrospectively looking back now, I think a lot of people have made this connection with, Luke Skywalker being on his back after being attacked by the Sand People in episode 4, and Kenobi walking up and putting his hand on him, that somehow he was force healing in there to kind of wake him up out of his consciousness kind of thing. Unconscious thing. Some people have said, oh, that's the first instance of it. I don't know. Maybe it is. But anyways, that's not the point of this. Okay. All right.
So what about your moment?
Yeah. So my moment is really just the be with me moment. And I don't have a lot of deep insight into a lot of this stuff. It's just one of those things that when you watch the movie, it happens so quickly, and unless you go spend the time No one's actually going out there and telling you exactly who's saying what and what's happening. And so that's what this is. So it starts off with, so these are all the Force ghosts that are talking to Rey as she's laying there, on death's door, if you will. But it starts off with young Obi-Wan Kenobi. So this is Ewan McGregor saying, "These are your final steps, Rey. Rise and take them." And then you get Anakin, Luminara, and Mace all saying Rey. Next is Anakin saying, "Bring back the balance, Rey, as I did." I know this rubbed people the wrong way, but I think it's for the wrong reasons. And I think if you objectively look at this, and again, we've discussed this quite a bit, but there is no doubt in my mind. And I think if you talk to a lot of Star Wars people that follow this, I'm going to call them fans, but people that really follow Star Wars, everybody's in agreement that Anakin was the chosen one. He did bring balance to the Force. End of story. Can it come out of balance? Absolutely. It's not a one and done thing. And we got confirmation of this in freaking Master and Apprentice. And we talked about that. Go listen to that show, right? But so the balance was out of the Force was out of balance at this point. And Rey is the one that has to bring it back to balance again. And whatever the definition of that is, again, another show for another day. Okay, so going back here, Ayla Sakura says, "In the night, find the light, Rey." Mace Windu, "You're not alone, Rey." Yoda, "Alone never have you been." Of course, he's got to speak that way. Qui-Gon Jinn, "Every Jedi who ever lived lives in you." And so for me, that is, and I mentioned, I threw this out there about whether or not it was do you take it at face value? Do you take it literally that every Jedi's in her? I guess so. I don't know. I mean, Qui-Gon's saying it. I don't know what that means,
right?
Exactly just yet, but I think it happens. Anakin, "The Force surrounds you, Rey." Anakin or Ayla, "Let it guide you." Ahsoka, "As it guided us." And that's really Ahsoka's only line. And I don't know. This is so when we hear that, the debate now becomes, okay, has she passed on at this point, or was that just her in the moment channeling? She was getting the call. I better pick up the phone and answer. "Oh, you need my help? Sure. Let me get a line in here." Maybe she says something. I don't know.
Right.
But that's really only her only line there. Mace Windu, "Feel the Force flowing through you, Rey." Anakin, "Let it lift you." Adi from Clone Wars. I think she was in Clone Wars, but I'm trying to remember where else we saw her. But Adi says, "Rise, Rey," and that's her only line. Qui-Gon, "We stand behind you, Rey." Obi-Wan, "Rey." Yoda, "Rise in the Force." Kanan finally comes in and says, "In the heart of a Jedi lies her strength." I was trying to find that. I went and did some research, and hopefully I'm wrong here, because I would love to think that in one of the episodes of Rebels or in the novelization in New Dawn or something, or one of the comics, that this was said to him. I couldn't find confirmation of that. But it just seems like it's an interesting line that he had said, that in the heart of a Jedi lies her strength.
Right.
It sounds like something he would say to Kanan or to Ezra.
Right.
I don't know. It seemed very Kanan, if nothing else. And then lastly, it's Anakin, "Rise," Qui-Gon Jinn, "Rise." And then finally we get Luke saying, "Rey, the Force will be with you always." So quite a host of different characters from a lot of different backgrounds. They're obviously all Jedi. Most of them are dead. Arguably, one is maybe still alive. So we'll see if there's any impact there. But that's kind of how it all breaks down. And then we get the "I am all the Sith, I'm all the Jedi," and that's the end of the show.
Right. So what's your take on the difference of what she was channeling before, when she was trying to get them to be with her, when she was on, I forgot the planet where the rebels were on, but between that moment and this moment, is it just the situation of when they decided to show up, or what's kind of your take on that of why not them, or why not throughout training, and why does everybody show up right now? Is it just the gravity of that moment or the importance of it, or is there something else you might speculate on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know it's one that I'm trying to think, like, even in the novelization, they don't really touch on it too much. And so we're kind of left to wax our own theories around this, because it kind of even goes back to Obi-Wan Kenobi telling Luke Skywalker, "If you face Vader, I can't be there with you." Right. Very similar situation here. And up until this moment, I going into this, I would have never thought that Jedi could be there to support somebody like that if they were fighting somebody like a Sith. I don't know the reason why that. I'm sure there's probably a reason for that. But prior to this, I don't think that would have been possible. And so I think what we're seeing here, and I don't have a really good reason, but I think what we're seeing here again is just unprecedented times, an unprecedented event, in that the Jedi knew that the only way that that she had failed, she was about to die, and that the only way they could bring balance to the Force is that they were going to have to intervene. What repercussions come of that, or what happens of that, either to them later down the road, I don't know. But it feels like they had to break a barrier. They had to do a break glass scenario where they finally decided, you know what, we're going to have to come in there. We're going to have to intervene. We're going to have to help her rise up, even though we can't physically do anything. Maybe that's the fine line, right? Is they can be in their heads. I don't know, but yeah, that's kind of where it's at. I don't know that I don't know why they were able to do it here, and what's going to come of this. But yeah,
that was the part I struggled with. Was how are they all there? Because we made in the Clone Wars, the original ending of the Clone Wars, where we had Yoda on his quest to learn effectively life after death, or retaining your spirit after death, and we got to see some of Qui-Gon's journey with it, as well as in the Certain Point of View book, the Master Apprentice chapter there, which I thought was really good. But now all of a sudden we have all these voices, and again we know that everyone is one with the Force, they're part of the Force, and all of that. But how is it even possible now with this? It's just a kind of a rhetorical question for you and me, but maybe some of our listeners got some additional insight on that. Would be really cool to hear. But I think that was some of the things of how is this all possible at this moment? And again, it's a pivotal moment, so it makes sense they would all show up and team up and let her draw on all of that, or at least give her the encouragement to draw on the Force to overcome this really insurmountable task that she's got in front of her.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, that's kind of the main show. Thank you for everybody that stuck around. I know we went way longer. I don't know, this may be the longest episode we've ever done, but it feels appropriate since this is the last time, maybe, that we'll talk about the Rise of Skywalker or the Skywalker Saga. No.
Last jump, maybe ever.
Last jump, maybe forever. All right, so let's talk about, I want to just do a couple different shout outs. So our YouTube subscribers just recently, Dale Ernman, Rob S722, Trey Thompson, Hard Countered, Trevor Stewart, Gregory Kassenmeyer, and our buddy over at 2Med2 Star Wars Network, who's joined us tonight as well. So thank you for joining there. We got some feedback on the more recent episodes. So Katya, I think she was on earlier, and I think she bounced already, but she said, "Oh my God, just discovered I can see you too. Love the podcast. Incredible how even after so many years we can still talk about Star Wars, bringing new points of view." So thank you for that. Eric Dunn says, "Really like the show. You guys are cool. I'm 48, a huge, true fan of Star Wars since the very beginning." I think I responded to that and said, "Hey, we're right there with you in a lot of ways." So thank you for that. Also, recently we got some feedback on Twitter from Isolated Tops, who says, really enjoying the series that we've done here, the 9 episodes. Serious, in-depth, fair-minded discussion. Don't agree with much of what Johnson did, but the Luke and Rey stuff ages very well, even if I didn't love the overall plot choices. And then finally, we picked up a new Patreon member. So thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts to Hellhounds, who's made his pledge via Patreon. So thank you. Again, that money goes right back into the show to cover the cost of keeping the show going and paying all our fees for getting stuff out there and tools that we use and like this stuff that we're using here to do the live shows and all that. So it goes a long way. Really sincerely appreciate it. So thank you very much, Hellhounds. Means a lot.
And huge shout out to our buddy Formalis for helping me get the lighting figured out, so I'm not in darkness. So appreciate it, Bob. We
can see the fine intricacies of that finely manicured beard that you sport every night. Okay, so that's going to do it for us on this episode. I'm not going to do the outro music because we'll fix that next episode. But finally, going into next week, we are going back and doing, I guess, a rewatch of sorts to some extent of The Mandalorian. So we're going to cover the Mandalorian episodes. We're going to break those down, though, in a lot more detail. So I know if you hadn't had a chance, maybe a good way to kind of prime you for those episodes is go back and listen to Mando Monday shows that Mike was doing when the first season of Mandalorian was active. He was doing those every Monday, as the show would imply. And but we're going to take those and just kind of take them to the nth degree. So we're talking 3-hour shows, breaking down 30 minutes. No, we'll break them down a little bit further and dissect them a little bit more. And we'll have the liberty of kind of now seeing the whole series and really kind of hopefully tying all that together. So hopefully you can join us for that. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Oh, always a pleasure, my friend.
Yes, same way. Thanks again for everybody that came out and joined us via Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and subscribe to all of the podcasts if you want to hear more. And with that, we will see you next week to talk about Mandalorian.
Thanks, everyone.